I unexpectedly transmigrated into the eldest son of Qin Shihuang, Qin Ziyue, and my fate has been closely linked to the Great Qin Empire ever since. My swordsmanship instructor is the Empire's top spear immortal, Gai Nya. Such an honor is enough to demonstrate my extraordinary identity. Even the legendary Emperor Huang Tian, who is said to have opened the gates of heaven with a single sword, is no match for me when compared, only worthy to stand by my side. However, on the day of my wedding, I made a shocking and outrageous move, hiding to escape the marriage. It's because the bride is the granddaughter of the war god Bai Xue, thinking that she went north alone to fight against a million Xiongnu, but when she returned, she asked the emperor to marry me. But I was full of resistance to this. Father, your child would rather die than submit. The next morning, outside the city of Inyang, the sound of horse hooves was clear and pleasant, just like the drums of war urging the troops. Countless black iron cavalry wearing dark iron armor, like a surging black tide, marched mightily towards the city of Chang'an. The leader of the army, the Qin female killer god Bai Xue, stood with a sword on horseback, wearing dark armor that reflected a cold light in the morning sun, showing a heroic and elegant demeanor. When the outline of the imperial capital Chang'an came into the eyes of the soldiers, tears welled up in the eyes of these passionate men. 3,000 miles to the north, after 100 battles with the Xiongnu, we finally return. The hardships of this battle can only be understood by those who have experienced it firsthand. But at this moment, Bai Xue's thoughts were not at all on this triumphant return. From beginning to end, the only person she cared about in her heart was her brother Ziyi, the dark bird. Bai Xue called softly. The female vice general Xin Niao on the side heard the sound, immediately turned her horse's head, came to Bai Xue's side, and respectfully asked, "What are the general's orders?" White Snow heard Xin Niao's official tone, smiled lightly, and said, "You said brother Ziyi would be very happy to see me back, right?" As she said this, a rare blush appeared on White Snow's face, as white and delicate as condensed fat. If someone were to see this at the moment, they would surely be shocked and unable to close their mouths. Who would have thought that the first female killer god of Qin would also have such a girlish posture? Even the mysterious bird, who is quite close to Bai Xue, is shocked at this moment. In her impression, the female killer in front of her has always been decisive and ruthless. The only color that can be seen on this face is the blood of enemies. Only when mentioning her brother Ziyi occasionally, Bai Xue's face will show a gentle and slightly shy expression like an ordinary woman. It's really strange. That Qin Zifenming is clearly the #1 playboy of Qin. Apart from the title of the emperor's eldest son, he can be said to have no redeeming qualities. With the conditions of the general's daughter at home, if she wants to get married, I don't know how many nobles and officials will come forward to propose. Even the prominent Prince Fusu, in the eyes of subordinates, the general is completely worthy. Xian Niao couldn't help but sigh lightly, and helplessly said, "I really don't know what the general sees in him." On the other hand, Bai Xue did not get angry, just smiled lightly, then patted the horse under the seat, saying, "No matter how the world evaluates brother Zai, he is the great hero in my heart." In those days, Bai Xue was just a 10-year-old girl who encountered suspicions and humiliations that ordinary people could hardly imagine. Her grandfather, Bai Xue, known as the first god of killing in Great Qin, dedicated his whole life to Great Qin, but after being summoned by King Zhaoxiang, he committed suicide in the military camp, and the cause of death remains a mystery. And those politicians in the court, however, used this to incite one rumor after another. White Snow, as the granddaughter of the killer god Bai Xue, the only legitimate descendant, naturally became the target of countless old Qin people's doubts and even malicious attacks. White Snow still remembers clearly to this day. The son of the commander of the Langshongwei family, relying on his own strength and strong physique, actually attempted to force her to do some evil things. Just as she was preparing to resist to the death, a slender figure appeared. "From today on, you are Qin Zai's future wife, and I will protect you in the future. If anyone dares to bully you, I, Qin Zai, will slaughter their entire family." The voice of the young man forever frozen in that summer in the imperial capital of Xianyang. The 12-year-old Qin Zai stood in front of Bai Xue, with a slender body that seemed to contain endless strength. At that time, Zai's older brother was fighting with the violent abuser, both covered in blood, until the leader of the Langshongwei arrived and they finally stopped. The commander of the Langshongwei is truly a snob. After bullying Bai Xue, a guilty minister, he still has the courage, but he dare not provoke Qin Zai, the eldest son of the emperor. He immediately slapped his own son twice and then knelt down to apologize together. Later, the commander of the Langshongwei was directly subjected to torture by the Zulong. And from then on, Qin Zai's words deeply rooted in Bai Xue's heart. "Brother Zai, you will always be my great hero. General, your saliva is about to drip." The call of the Xian Niao pulled Bai Xue, A heavy love patient. Back from her memories. Xian Niao said teasingly. Bai Xue blushed again. Suddenly, the mysterious bird seemed to remember something, and his face couldn't help but darken as he said, I heard that at the Grand Court meeting yesterday. Scholar Chunyu suggested that your majesty appoint Prince Fusu as the crown prince, and also spoke ill of the crown prince. Snow White's face sank, saying, although Chunyu is a great Qin scholar, he also serves as Fusu's teacher. These two men may appear kind and humble on the surface, but they always exude a despicable pseudo-gentleman demeanor. Now they dare to jointly instruct others to slander brother's eye, which is truly despicable. Seeing Bai Xue's face look a little hard, Qian Bird hurriedly added, that Chunyu spoke out of turn. Reprimanded by His Majesty. Prime Minister Li Si also stepped forward and convicted him of great disrespect, with a 30-pound caning, as an example to others. Again, Zhao Gao, the order of the Central Caravan, has proposed that, 3 days from now, a temple examination be held in the Hall of the Unicorn. Let all the dukes of Great Qin have an honorable contest and fight it out in front of the people of the world. The questions for the temple examination, on the other hand, are drawn up by His Majesty the Emperor himself as a sign of fairness. After listening to Xian Bird's words, Bai Xue's face then looked better, but in his heart, he was still very spiteful of Fusu's behavior. Even if brother Ziyi has 1,000 or 10,000 faults, it shouldn't be up to you as a younger brother to discredit him. Let them make a scene. They're just a bunch of clowns with claptrap. Since ancient times, it's always been the country's eldest ruler, and there's no one who can shake brother Ziyi's position as the crown prince. If there are any disorganized people who dare to harbor evil intentions, I will not be blamed. Speaking of this, Bai Xue's pure and beautiful face appeared a few points of cultivator-like murderous aura at once. It seems that the little sister who was still blushing shyly just now has disappeared without a trace, and in its place is the female killing god who killed millions of enemies in the northern border. Seeing this, the Shen Bird on the side did not dare to say anything more, and the temper of his own general. She knows best. General. This is just a matter of speaking before my subordinates today, but when you come before His Majesty on another day, never say that. Bai Xue sniffed, but did not say anything, only gently nodded her head and, immediately, a pair of beautiful eyes were looking in the direction of the elder duke's mansion again, with a few colors of anticipation flowing out of them. Brother Ziyi, I'm back. Hourly. Inside the palace of Zhongtai. Report. The black-armored warrior hurriedly entered the hall, bowed, and said, Your Majesty. General Bai Xue has returned to the dynasty with my 100,000 troops of gallant old Qin and has arrived in Inyang. The ancestral dragon sniffed, and a few joyful looks spread across his majestic face. This girl, Bai Xue, could be said to be the one he watched grow up. I couldn't see it when I was young, but now I'm leading the army north, suppressing the rebellion and retreating from the Huns. It has really inherited the mantle of his grandfather, the god of kill, Bai Qi. Under the rule of Qin, there will be rewards. And now that Bai Xue has done this unparalleled service for the court, it must be heavily rewarded. Come on man, pass on my order to have the Imperial catering house prepare a grand banquet, right above the court. Meet Snowy Triumphant. Furthermore, let all the males, they must come. End of this chapter. Chapter 5, Zhao Gao? Just a royal dog. A few moments later, the eunuchs who went to the various princely mansions to pass on the orders, moved one after another. The one responsible for traveling to the eldest prince's residence to deliver the order was none other than Zhao Gao, the orderer of the central carriage house. Only, at this time Zhao Gao's face, but it is showing some condensation. Great General Bai Xue, who was very much in love with the eldest son, Ying Ziyou, and is the first person in the Qin army. I'm only afraid that it will have an impact on the temple exams 2 days later. Could it be that, in addition to Fuso, there was going to be another strong competitor? Thinking of this, Zhao Gao hurriedly shook his head, and then secretly smiled and, it just feels like I'm still worrying too much. Although Ying Ziye is the eldest son of the emperor, his status as the first dude of Great Qin is well deserved. As Zhao Gao pondered, he arrived at the entrance of the elder duke's residence. It's just that, at this moment the Xian black door is tightly closed. What's going on? It's daytime now. Why is the gate of this mansion closed? What is this Ying Ziyou up to? Thinking of this, Zhao Gao immediately went forward and knocked on the door of the residence. Bang bang. A moment later, a boy opened a crack in the door, and seeing that the visitor was Zhao Gao, immediately, he laughed and said, It's really not a good time for Lord Zhao to come. The eldest prince gave an order just yesterday to blockade the mansion. No one is allowed to enter. All guests, and none at all. Zhao Gao sniffed and frowned. If it was in normal times, naturally, he didn't dare to offend Ying Ziye openly, but now he was acting on the orders of His Majesty the Emperor. This official has come to proclaim the decree by the decree of His Majesty the Emperor. Open the door quickly. But, Your Highness over there. The boy hesitated, and was thinking of going to report first when an inch of strength suddenly erupted from Zhao's hand. Straight away, the heavy door of the mansion was pushed straight open. Bang! Accompanied by a loud bang. That boy was also sent flying out with a tremendous force, heavily slammed on top of the wall. Zhao Gao, on the other hand, clapped his hands blandly and prepared to enter the elder duke's residence to announce his decree. However, just at the moment when its front foot was about to step over the threshold, only a lazy voice rang out. Lord Zhao is so powerful. It's said that Lord Zhao's hands are all over the world, and that you're the one under father. And now it seems that's true. Not even the royal family of the Ying clan. Ying Ziye was dressed in a basalt-colored robe and spoke in a leisurely tone. But Zhao Gao is a change of color at the word. The arrogance of just now swept away. A few drops of cold sweat couldn't help but seep out on his forehead. If Feng had forced his way through the door of the mansion in order to read the holy decree of the ancestral dragon. If you don't take a stand now, you are in effect recognizing Ying Ziye's words in front of everyone. Contempt for the royal family and pride in his accomplishments. If this kind of news is spread to the Zhengtai Palace, there are 9 lives or not enough to kill. Thinking of this, Zhao Gao hurriedly arched his hand and smiled sarcastically. Your Highness, where are your words? It's a real tosser for the slave girl. Where does a slave girl have any heavenly eyes and hands, but is only one of His Majesty's dogs? It's Ying's lackey. How dare he be rude to your Highness? It's just that the slave girl has come here to read His Majesty the Emperor's decree. That watchman's boy has not been allowed to enter, and the slave girl was anxious in her heart, fearing that she might miss His Majesty's business, so she broke down the door and entered. Everything the slave girl does is for the sake of His Majesty, for the sake of the court. Please be clear, Your Highness. When he said that, he saluted again. Who knows? For Zhao Gao's words, Ying Ziye was turning her head sideways, not even listening to them. Just fade away. As the saying goes, even when you beat a dog, you have to look at the master. Shouldn't you be doing something? Zhao Gao sniffed. His face was slightly stunned, and then he directly walked towards the boy over there. And, kneeling down directly, he said, the party was in a hurry. I hope that your excellency will not be blamed. As for today's matter, I will definitely offer 10 gold as compensation. Such a scene can scare the boy. When did he dare to think that the imperial household would kneel down and apologize for him? A lowly servant? And give back 10 gold? But in his heart, he was likewise secretly delighted, not expecting the imperial eldest son to stand up for him. Seeing this, Ying Ziye was also slightly surprised in his heart. Sure enough, Zhao Gao can really endure. Say, what is father's decree? Zhao Gao heard this and got up and marched to Ying Ziye, arching his hand and saying, reporting back to your Highness, His Majesty has decreed. 2 days later, in the Kirin Hall of the Xianyang Palace, the temple examination will be held, and I invite all of you gentlemen to come along and compete. Furthermore, Great General Bai Xue returns to the court today, and later in the day, His Majesty will be hosting a banquet in the Kirin Palace to recognize military achievements, so please make sure that your Highness goes. With that, he kowtowed heavily again and it seemed to want to express its loyalty to Ying in this way. Ying Ziyou sniffed and lightly shouted behind her, Lao Jiao, let's go. Before the words left his mouth, a middle-aged man with an unimpressive appearance appeared out of nowhere. It appeared behind Ying Ziyou. Although his appearance was not very eye-catching, his whole person exuded an introverted aura that it makes you look at it in a sideways way. Wait for 2. This chapter is not finished. Please click the next page to continue reading. After the people left, Zhao Gao then slowly got up and the shady eyes gazed coldly at the direction that Ying Ziye had left. Who was the one who followed Ying Ziyou? This man, though he looked no different from a normal person. Why did he himself, in his feeling a hidden and powerful force? Is it an illusion? Thinking of this, Zhao Gao's eyes showed a few contemplative colors. This elder duke, I'm afraid it's not as foppish and simple as imagined. Approaching the night, inside the Kirin Hall of the Xianyang Palace, an unprecedented grand feast opens the prelude. The Kirin Temple, which is usually magnificent and ancient, but somewhat austere and cold, is today under the ancestral dragon's personal order, rarely decorated with gold jewelry and silk. It looks very gorgeous, a grandeur of a great country. Those invited, besides the princes of Great Qin and members of the royal family, there were also the 3 dukes and 9 ministers as well as the family heads of the clans, so it could be said that the seat was full of public officials and nobles. And today's protagonist is the first female killing god of Qin, who led the army north to quell the rebellion and return to the court. Snow White, above the feast, seeing that Bai Xue still has not appeared, the gunners are all discussing in private. The granddaughter of that god of murder, Bai Xue, a daughter, had become the #1 person in the Great Qin military world, better than even a man. Such a marvelous woman who went into battle to kill the enemy, only to be covered with tendons and, "You don't have any girl's beauty, do you?" Just then, the crier's voice rang out, "Great General Bai Xue has arrived." Before the words fell, Bai Xue, clad in black armor and a scarlet cloak, with her head bound with a basalt gold-bordered band, was, stride into the Unicorn Hall, waist with a sword, the first emperor licensed, a good valiant woman. "I, Bai Xue, see your majesty." Seeing Bai Xue appeared, the gunners, who were still talking about it, opened their mouths wide and, there was a look of surprise in his eyes. Great Qin's first female god of killing, the one who brought 100,000 troops north to kill the Huns. It was such a lovely beauty. If he could be married to him, it would be a superior choice, both in terms of personal affection and power, while Bai Xue at this moment, but did not notice the change in the mood of the public officials and nobles. There was not even any expectation of the reward that His Majesty the Emperor was about to bestow. There is only one person in the heart of this female general today, although she was kneeling on one knee. Her beautiful eyes were searching around in the courtroom. A few moments later, finally, in a corner, he found the figure that he had been longing for. Brother Ziyou, goodbye. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. The First Emperor, Zhao Gao. Who are you playing the bully for? Inside the Kirin temple, Ying Ziye was boredly fiddling with the small jade cup in front of her, when she suddenly felt a tightening in her heart. Instinctively, he clashed his eyes with Snow's. That's a sharp eye. This ninny, as the eldest son of the Emperor of Great Qin, he should have been close to the imperial throne, but in order to keep Snow from noticing, all at the risk of his father's displeasure, himself, sit in this nook and cranny. But I didn't expect to be found out anyway. It's a sin. However, at this moment, Bai Xue was unable to detect Ying Ziye's thoughts at all, especially after seeing that Ying Ziye had noticed herself. Her face even changed, even his body sat up straight, and his heart felt nothing but overwhelming joy. It seems that Brother Ziyou still has himself in his heart. You've even cleaned up your appearance in front of yourself. Today, Ying Ziye is dressed in black, with a basil hair tie, an incredibly plain attire. In Bai Xue's eyes it was as if a filter had been added, becoming the best dressed under the sky. Thinking about this, a few giggles couldn't help but spread across Snow's face, only to be quickly suppressed. Snowy, what are you thinking? This is the court's celebration banquet. It's in front of His Majesty. You're so out of order. And the dynastic gunners see in front of the eyes of the first female killing god of Great Qin first giggled for a while, spinning around and forcing himself back down. A few unnatural blushes appeared on his face, and his heart was even more curious. This General White, what is he up to? When Ancestral Dragon saw this, he secretly smiled in his heart, but on his face, he pretended not to see it. He just said aloud, General Bai has swung his army northward this time, suppressing the rebellion and retreating the Xiongnu for my Great Qin. I will reward you heavily. Give wine. Before the words left his mouth, an attendant hurriedly poured the fine wine into a bottle and presented it to Bai Xue. Seeing this, Bai Xue immediately took a step forward and took the initiative to receive the wine glass. Turning to the Ancestral Dragon, he saluted. Your Majesty is too kind. It's really hard for me to deserve the holy praise. This great victory in the north is more a credit to the good men of my gallant old Qin. It is with such a group of generals that my Great Qin's kingdom can be stabilized. If your Majesty wants a reward, don't reward the ministers. Reward the generals of the 3 armies. I am here to toast your Majesty. Before the words fell, Bai Xue took the wine in the bottle and drank it all in one go. Ancestral Dragon saw this, laughed aloud as also the cup of wine drink, and then said, Good. Under the rule of Qin, there will be a reward. General Bai will have a reward, and so will the generals and soldiers of the 3 armies. Come on, pass on my order. Great General Bai Xue has been meritorious in quelling the rebellion in the north, and will be rewarded with a first degree of knighthood, rewarded with 10,000 taels of gold and 1,000 acres of good land. In addition, for the generals going north, each of them will be rewarded with 100 gold for 1 level of advancement merit. When these words came out, the gunners who filled the seat could not help but be stunned. Such a fine woman of talent, power and wealth. I don't know how many people are going to be jealous. As for Bai Xue herself, she didn't seem to care about the Ancestral Dragon's reward, and only made another salute to the. He then took the initiative to pick up a glass of wine and toasted Ying Ziye, who was sitting in the corner. I have the audacity to drink another toast to the elder duke. Before the words fell, the court full of public officials once again dropped their jaws in shock. The court was full of ministers looking at this Great Qin's #1 dude and female killing goddess, Bai Xue. The eyes were all colorful with disbelief. Although Bai Xue is a foreign minister, it can be said that he is already in a position of great authority, even if his grandfather, the god of killing. Bai Xue, it is no more than that. Such a good woman, even for the most likely successor to the throne, Duke Fusu, and totally worthy. Why choose such a loser who only knows how to have fun all day, just because he's the eldest son? Seeing this, Ying Ziye picked up his wineglass in a slightly embarrassed manner. Turning to Bai Xue, he said, General Bai has done a great service for the country and is a meritorious member of my Great Qin. It is up to me to honor you. After saying that, he then drank the wine in his cup in one go, and then he stopped talking. When Bai Xue saw this, she wasn't annoyed. In her opinion, Brother Ziyou was just embarrassed. Even the heart is secretly happy. At this moment, if there was anyone in the Kirin Hall who was unhappy in his heart, it was only the Duke Fusu, this second son of the emperor, known for his modesty and generosity. At the moment, he only felt that his heart was filled with envy and jealousy. What makes this Ying Ziye so adored by such an outstanding Bai Xue? In terms of appearance, both born of the same father, I think I am not inferior to him. In terms of ability, nowadays the whole court is most favorable to him, and his reputation is also the best. It's only a matter of time before he inherits the throne. Ying Ziyou, a dude. What virtue can be favored by Bai Xue? While the banquet was going on, the Xian bird was approaching Bai Xue's side and whispering with his ear. Hourly, Bai Xue's face suddenly sank as she drew the long knife at her waist and pointed it at Zhao Gao. Zhao Gao, how dare you? Such a scene. It instantly shocked the entire court. As for Ying Ziye, she was likewise startled by Bai Xue's move, and was ready to get up and plead for her. It is important to know that since the year Jing stabbed Qin, the first emperor of the temple to draw the knife is the most taboo. Even if the beginning of the emperor's gift of white snow, praise and worship is not the name of the court, does not tend to the sword on the temple. However, such a move has obviously touched on the son of God's rebellious behavior. This chapter is not finished. Please click the next page to continue reading. Scales. Above the dragon terrace, the first emperor's eyes were slightly glued, his aura like a mountain, and he shouted authoritatively, General Bai, do you know what you're doing? When Bai Xue heard this, she calmed down violently and bowed on one knee. Your Majesty, please calm your anger. I am really indignant in my heart, and I can't wait to execute Zhao Gao. As she spoke, Bai Xue's cold eyes also did not forget to look at Zhao Gao, not hiding the killing intent in her heart in the slightest. Ha! Ancestral Dragon's complexion moved slightly as he looked at Zhao Gao in surprise, and in Zhao Gao's mind, he was equally puzzled. Back to your Majesty, I really don't know where I offended General Bai. Zhao Gao doubly wrong said. I don't know. Ha! Bai Xue sneered and said, you're a house slave of the royal family who doesn't follow the rules. How dare you spread wildness in front of the eldest prince's residence, injure his servants, and break into the house? How dare you? The first emperor's face plummeted at his words. A mountain-like might instantly envelop Zhao Gao's body. Zhao Gao, what was it that Bai Xue said just now? Today you will be here, in front of a court full of ministers, to give me an explanation. Zhao Gao heard the words, rushed to the temple in fear, crouched down and worshipped. The slave girl was also in a hurry at that time, fearing that I have misplaced His Majesty's decree. This is the reason. Without waiting for Zhao Gao to finish, Zhu Long said with murderous intent, good you minion, I've asked you to go and deliver the decree. Who are you shaking off your authority for? Are you telling the world that in this great Qin Empire, you are greater than me? Zhao Gao heard the words and bowed in fear. Your Majesty rest in peace. Your Majesty rest in peace. A slave girl wouldn't dare to do so even if she had the guts of heaven. I also ask your Majesty to spare the slave girl's life on account of her momentary haste. Humph. Ancestral Dragon snorted coldly, frightening Zhao Gao to immediately shut his mouth. If I hadn't thought of your loyalty in the past, I would have cut you down long ago. But in this case, you went too far. This statement was made. A chill rose in Zhao Gao's heart and he crouched his head and shivered. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. The female slayer god requests an order to marry Ying Ziye. Inside the Kirin temple, above the dragon terrace, the first emperor's 12-pearl tassel was windless, and he said without anger, after today's imperial banquet, go get the 80 stiletto. If you dare to do it again, you will be chopped off without mercy. I kowtow to your Majesty. Zhao Gao stood up from the ground trembling. This time it was only thanks to His Majesty's heaven-like virtue that you were able to retrieve a dog's life. If there's a next time, I'll kill you and then ask for forgiveness from His Majesty. Snow said nonchalantly. Zhao Gao's face was stunned. Then he arched his hand in reparation and said, General's words, my humble servant will definitely keep them in mind. At this time, the Prime Minister Li Si busybody out, with the intention of rounding off the situation, said, Your Majesty, I think that today is the happy day for General Bai Xue to return to China with 100,000 warriors from my Great Qin. If your Majesty gets angry over such things and breaks the holy body, it would be a loss to the world of Great Qin. After saying that, he looked at Bai Xue again and arched his hand. General Bai Xue is from a famous family. For wealth and power, it is only commonplace. In my opinion, Your Majesty might as well give General Bai Xue a chance to ask herself. What do you want most? Li Si is in the end a man who has been in the officialdom for a long time. But in 3 words, it then eased the atmosphere of saber rattling in the great hall, and then immediately drew the attention of the crowd to Bai Xue, the main character of the banquet, which could not be described as high. The ancestral dragon snorted coldly at his words, and then he looked at Bai Xue. The anger in his eyes had subsided a bit. Faintly, he said, "Granted, General Bai Xue, what do you want? You might as well tell me." When Bai Xue heard this, she was first slightly stunned, and then her face actually flushed a few shades of red. Only seeing her clench her teeth, as if she had made some sort of determination, she arched her hand and said, "Your Majesty, truth be told, I have a matter of a life's work, so to speak. Long before I went north, no, at a young age, I was already thinking, if Your Majesty is willing to reward me, then I, for one, would like to ask Your Majesty to grant me a marriage and betroth me to the elder Duke, Ying Ziyou." That being said, the battle hardened. The first female killer god of Great Qin, who had beheaded countless Huns without changing her face, actually lowered her head shyly, and the court was full of ministers, and at this moment, after hearing the words of Bai Xue, all of them could not help but fall into an uproar. What? General Snow, want to marry Mr. Chang? Ying Ziye. Although he is the eldest son of the Emperor of Great Qin, he is also the first dude of Great Qin. The whole day is pretty much nothing but fun and games. And what's her status? She's the #1 female killer in Great Qin. She's the most powerful woman in the world. Even if you want to climb up the ladder, you should consider Duke Fusu. On the contrary, Shihuangdi Yingzheng had a meaningful smile on his face. It seemed that he had known Snow's mind for a long time. On the contrary, that Duke Fusu was shocked with anger. On the basis of what? In terms of reputation, he was known for his generosity. There are countless gatekeepers. In terms of talent and learning, none of the dukes of Great Qin can compare. The only status is that of a mere second son. Just because he's the eldest son? But 3 days from now, when my father takes the test, I'm sure I'll beat them all. It's not certain who the throne will be in the future. Where could he, Wen Zai, compare himself? Fusa's mind was like this, and the palm of his hand holding the wine cup couldn't help but be bruised. And first of all, not to mention that Bai Xue is a great beauty of the country, alone the power behind it. It cannot be underestimated. Although Bai Qi cut his own throat and died that year, his old army survived. Otherwise, with Bai Xue alone, a weak woman, even if she has great skill, and how could he have gained a foothold in the army in such a short period of time? If Bai Xue really wants to do something, with his status as Bai Qi's descendant, those old things in the army would only support her at all costs. Once Bai Xue really got married to Wen Zai, even if he was the #1 dude in Great Qin, once you have the support of Bai Xue, it is equivalent to having the support of the entire military community of Takeshi Lao Qin. When the time comes, coupled with his almost natural advantage of being the firstborn son of the emperor, the position of the crown prince, I'm afraid that even if myself and Hu Hei add up, it will be hard to shake again. Fu Su's indignation in his heart increased instead of decreasing, and he secretly glanced at Ying Ziye, who was sitting in the corner. The eyes were full of resentment. On the contrary, Wen Zai, who was sitting in the corner, spewed out a mouthful of wine. This little ninny, seriously? As soon as he came back, he made such a fuss that he was ready for a showdown. But it's not stupid enough to be targeted by a firefight. Ever since Bai Xue had said those words, Ying Ziye had at least felt dozens of unkind looks. Fusu, in particular, was staring at himself like a resentful woman, and a touch of gravity appeared between the brows of Zhao Gao, the order of the central caravan. Damn! If Bai Xue really marries Ying Ziyou, then the first dude of the Great Qin dynasty, it would be the equivalent of a carp jumping over the dragon's door. At that time, whether it's Fusu, who enjoys the world's reputation and the admiration of his ministers, or Ying Ziye, who had the support of the military world, was not something that Hu Hai, whom he supported, could fight against. This chapter is not finished. Please click the next page to continue reading. This is something that absolutely cannot be done. Just as the crowd was having their own thoughts, the first emperor was laughing aloud. Good. Since General Bai has such a heart, my heart is very comforted. Your grandfather, Bai Qi, would have spent his life in military service for the Great Qin, and now you're married to Ziyou. It's kind of a kiss-off. Ziyou. When Wen Zai heard this, he busied himself and stepped out from his seat, arching his hand and saying, "Father, the first emperor is seated squarely on the dragon chair." The tone is meaningful. You as the eldest son of the Emperor of Great Qin, but all you know is to have fun all day long. So go on. How should the country be? I previously thought that you were not yet of age, so I also went with you, but now it seems that it's just about time someone took charge of you. When Ying Ziye heard this, his face hesitated and said, Father, my son doesn't want to start a family. My son is only weak and still a child today. When these words came out, the whole court was in an uproar. What's the situation? Great Qin's #1 dude, is he out of his mind? And first of all, not to mention that Bai Xue was born in a beautiful country. Its power is even more unrivaled in the dynasty. Such a beautiful girl asks to marry you, and you refuse in front of the ministers? Greetings, father. My son thought that the royal brother is the foundation of the country and naturally has the power to choose the marriage. If imperial brother is unwilling, the matter can be discussed at a later date. Fu Su was busy standing out, speaking with an impassioned face, as if he was really thinking about winning Ziyi. And Zhao Gao, the order of the central caravan, stood out at this time, arching his hand and saying, Your Majesty, the guilty slave thought that, now that the palace examination is approaching, if the marriage is bestowed at this moment, I am afraid that it will only mess up the heart of Chang Gongzi. State affairs come first, private affairs come second, and the guilty slave thought it would be better for the matter to wait until the end of the palace exams and, after the establishment of the crown prince, we will discuss it again. When the first emperor heard this, his gaze was slightly condensed, but he did not make a statement. How could a 1,000-year-old emperor not see what the two of them were thinking? Afterward, he was looking at Ying Ziyou again, his eyes looking like they could speak. I don't believe that you really don't have any feelings for Bai Xue. 2 days from now, at the Imperial examination, if you're still a good man, then fight for your girl. Afterwards, Ancestral Dragon faced the entire court and said with a light smile, In that case, then the matter is settled. End of this chapter. Chapter 8, SkyNet Xianyu vs Sweeping Old Man. The grand feast in the Qilin Palace came to an end after the Ancestral Dragon finalized the final results. It was night, Hu Hai's residence. In the secluded room, the two of them, Hu Hai and Zhao Gao, sat opposite each other. How does the master feel about today's events? Hu Hai casually fiddled with the cups on the tabletop, but his words showed the city. Zhao Gao sniffed, his eyes slightly condensed and said, Behind Bai Xue, are the millions of soldiers of the gallant old Qin? Apart from His Majesty the Emperor, the one they admire most in their hearts is this Great Qin first female killing god. If she marries Mr. Chang, then Ying Ziyou will have gained the Dragon Gate, one with the support of the military community. In addition, I'm afraid that the elder duke is only not as simple as it seems. Today I went to announce the decree, and I saw the old man behind him, who should have martial arts skills. It's just that its strength is internalized and its realm cannot be felt. Hu Hai's face was slightly stunned at his words. As for Zhao Gao's strength, although Hu Hai was not aware of it, however, it also had the strength to abuse Finger Xian realm powerhouses. Even he couldn't see the strength of that old man. Could it be that that old man was a heavenly sign? And this big brother of his, who has been pretending to be a pig in a poke? At the thought, Huey's brow tightened, and a pair of grim eyes a few fierce glints appeared steeply. In that case, let's give it a try. Here, Zhao Gao bowed and retreated from the room. In the meantime, the house of the eldest duke, in front of the heavy, basalt-colored gate, Bai Xue, the first female killing god of Great Qin, came alone, and at the moment, she was not wearing armor. Instead, he changed into a small family woman's dress, and even pasted some flowers in yellow, looking less valiant and more gentle. Bang bang, hearing the knock on the door, the boy who was watching the door opened a crack, and seeing that it was Bai Xue who had come to, I can't help but smile bitterly. General came at a bad time. The duke ordered that the residence is under martial law and no one is to be seen. Bai Xue sniffed and frowned. What no one can see? Didn't he even go out today? Open the door. The boy felt the oppressive sensation of snow pouncing on his face and, thinking of the servant who was nearly killed by Zhao Gao earlier, he busily opened the door and said in a panic, General, please come in, please come in. When Bai Xue saw this, she resumed that little girl look and smiled as she walked towards Ying Ziye's residence. Brother Ziyou, I'm coming. When Ying Ziye sniffed, his face was filled with hopelessness. Originally, he did not intend to involve Bai Xue in this matter, which was why he spoke out and opened his mouth to refuse. But now, hey, Ying Ziye let out a long, helpless sigh, shook her head, and opened the door to the room. What are you doing here so late? It's so late. Of course I came to see you. Snowy playfully spat out her tongue and walked straight towards the house. Smoothly the bamboo basket he carried with him lifted up and took out some pastries inside. This is called milk cake, and it is a specialty of the royal court of the Huns in the north, and I have, according to the custom of the Central Plains, With the addition of cinnamon, the flavor is especially good. At that time, that Hun's 3rd King's division was all but wiped out by me, and that Hun cook taught me to make this. I just spared his life. Speaking up to this point, Bai Xue's face suddenly turned slightly red, and she shyly said, "For the temple examination in 2 days, you're going to win no matter what, and I'll help you in the shadows. If you lose, I'll die, and I'll never marry anyone else." When Ying Ziye heard this, a different emotion appeared in his heart for some reason. In the next moment, Bai Xue was the one who pressed her finger against the corner of Ying Ziye's lips. "No need to say it, I know it all." And while the relationship between the two in the room was very delicate, outside the residence of the eldest prince, a dissension is already brewing in its infancy. Outside the mansion, 10 silhouettes stood straight up. Moonlight poured down, illuminating the golden spiderweb embroidery on its body. The person leading the group was a middle-aged man with a vicissitude of face, dressed in black and a head of black hair was tied back casually with a hair tie. Although it looked a bit disheveled, the whole person exuded a morose and murderous aura. SkyNet's first-class assassin, Xian Yu, together with the 9 dead soldiers whose strength was on par with that of the Killers. Tonight's assassination lineup is nothing short of luxurious. Hourly, 10 silhouettes leapt up and sped under the moon. Like ghosts, Xian Yu stood tall, looking at such an empty mansion, and couldn't help but show a few cruel smiles. Ying Ziyou really is the #1 dude in Great Qin. There aren't even any guards in this huge mansion. Did you take all the money to impress your lady friend? It seems that today's task will soon be completed. Not far away was Ying Ziyou's residence, where the candlelight was flickering. Just as Xian Yu and the others were about to make their move, a strange sound suddenly came out. "Brush up. This chapter is not finished. Please click the next page to continue reading." Xian Yu and the others followed the sound and searched in the darkness of the night. A white-bearded old man was found sweeping the floor with a broom. Big night. Sweeping? The SkyNet crowd couldn't help but look at each other. A few moments later, Xian Yu was the first to react, and his dark eyes were already bursting with ferocious light. "Kill him, move sharply," Xian Yu said in a deep voice. One of the dead soldiers sniffed and instantly stepped forward, his long sword stabbing at the old man's throat, only seeking to kill him with a single blow. Who knew that the old sweeper, who was still sweeping the ground with his head down in one breath, was probing out with a finger in the next moment? A seemingly light finger contained infinite power. Bang! With a loud bang, the dead soldier flew out backwards like a sandbag, not knowing whether he was alive or dead, and the long sword in his hand was shattered into pieces. "What?" Xian Yu lost his voice and exclaimed, his brows furrowed, unable to imagine that this unassuming old man. It's amazing that you have such strength. You guys, together, here." Before the words fell, the remaining 8 dead soldiers attacked towards the old man, sweeping the ground in unison. Their momentum was like a shock. The worst of them had Vidra realm strength, and with 8 people surrounding them, even if it was Xian Yu himself, it also has to be dealt with seriously. Who knows? Without waiting for the 8 dead soldiers to get close, they were sent flying out by a wave of body-shielding astral energy. Instead, the old man sweeping the ground didn't even look at them from the beginning. All that was left to do was to clean up the pieces of the longsword on the floor. How? Xian Yu's heart set off shocking waves. What a strong inner strength. This old man in front of me, his strength is unfathomable. And the 9 dead soldiers of SkyNet, in front of him, it's not even worth mentioning. If we can't get past this man tonight, assassinating Ying Ziyou will be a fool's errand. Make the first move. Xian Yu's mind moved and he approached in an instant, and after sensing the earth-sweeping old man's protective astral energy, immediately, both swords came out. Break! Bang! The explosions resounded more than a few times. Just when Xian Yu thought he was winning, he saw the old man sweeping the ground sigh lightly. "Hey, it's time to clean again." Xian Yu's face turned blue as he sniffed. "I didn't expect the other party to ignore him so much." "That's fine. I'll send you on your way today." Xian Yu's 2 swords clashed, erupting in a burst of heavenly sword intent as countless sword chi shot out. Vowing to take the life of the old man in front of him. Positive blade solace, reverse blade soul suppression. However, when those sonorous sword chi touched the old man sweeping the ground, it was like a breeze that brushed by, not even breaking the corners of its clothes. What? Amidst Xian Yu's horrified gaze, the old man sweeping the ground slowly walked towards him, lightly probing a finger. One designation of dryness. The terrifying pressure instantly attacked, and the strong sense of crisis made Xian Yu feel like a great enemy. At this moment, Xian Yu only had one thought in his mind. Escape! Don't hesitate for a moment. Xian Yu immediately stood up, stepping into the air and preparing to flee when the force of a single finger had landed on his body. Pust! Blood soared through the darkness. Xian Yu only felt that the world in front of him had become upside down. The entire spirit of the person seemed to be crushed by the sweeping old man's single finger. But he didn't dare to stay for half a moment, and with his last ounce of energy, he fled from this place like a madman. When the old man sweeping the ground saw this, he didn't pursue any further, but only looked at the blood on the ground and sighed softly in helplessness. Why do you have to do it? The bloodstains are real bad to clean up. End of this chapter. Chapter 9, The Long Duke's residence hides a shocking secret. When Bai Xue was contentedly coming out of the Long Duke's inner mansion, all that could be seen was the misty sky and the tranquility outside the mansion. Not noticing anything out of the ordinary. The atmosphere was subtle just now, but it was a pity that it was so close. Snow clenched her fists, but inside she was in a happy mood. She was in a happy mood. He even hummed a little song and left the mansion with a brisk gait. And in the meantime, Ying Ziyou stood in front of the elder duke's mansion, looking at the mess that was left behind by the old man sweeping the ground after repelling the SkyNet experts. A trace of coldness flashed in his eyes. He turned towards the old man, his tone quiet and majestic like an abyss. Hard work. The old man sweeping the ground raised his head slightly, revealing a pair of deep eyes that, he gently shook his head. There is no harm. The old man was just doing his part. With that, he lowered his head again and continued to swing the broom in his hand. It was as if everything in front of me was just a passing cloud. Ying Ziye sneered, but his heart was in turmoil. He knew that the SkyNet experts Xiao Gao had sent out this night were by no means idle, and unbeknownst to them, the strength of this old man sweeping the ground was even more unfathomable. Under the heavens, there were very few people who could fight with them. At the same time, he also understood that this was Xiao Gao testing his bottom line. Let's see if he's really as untouchable as the rumors say. 18th brother, you really can't help it. Ying Ziye muttered, his eyes revealing a hint of sternness. Since you want to see my bottom card, then I'll let you see enough. I'm only afraid that when the time comes, you can't afford it. In the meantime, Xiao Gao, the order of the central caravan, had waited all night in his residence. However, he never received a reply from SkyNet expert Xianyu. He frowned as a feeling of unease rose in his heart. He knew that SkyNet had always acted cleanly and would never appear to be dragging its feet. The only possibility is that the mission has failed. Is there really a big secret in the eldest prince's house? Xiao Gao muttered. And in his mind he couldn't help but begin to ponder various possible scenarios. What he was worried about was that if Ying Ziye really hid unfathomable strength and undercurrents, then I'm afraid his plans will be jeopardized. The lights swayed, reflecting Xiao Gao's gloomy and determined face. He urgently summoned the remaining members of SkyNet, all of whom he had carefully trained to be dead. All of them are skillful and ruthless, and they are even more loyal to Xiao Gao. At this moment, the atmosphere was solemn to the extreme. Xiao Gao sat before the stone table in the courtyard, his gaze like a torch as he scanned the SkyNet members in front of him. His eyes revealed an unquestionable majesty and coldness, as if they were able to penetrate everything. Last night, the SkyNet experts I sent out were lost. Xiao Gao slowly spoke. The voice was low and strong. Now, I want you to search for their whereabouts with all your might, and at the same time, investigate the movements of the elder duke's residence. Remember, this matter concerns Prince Hua and the future of Great Qin. There is no room for error. Here, the crowd of SkyNet members heard the words and responded in unison. Their voices resounding, reveals an air of competence and determination. With Xiao Gao's order, the crowd of SkyNet members moved quickly. They were like a ghostly figure, traveling silently through the night. Their movements were swift and competent, blending with the night in a way that made them difficult to explore. The night was deep and all was silent. Xiao Gao was concerned about the matter of the eldest prince's residence and decided to go to Hu Hai's residence in person to discuss the big plan. Hu Hai's residence. The lights are out and the door is closed. Xiao Gao knocked lightly on the door ring, his voice echoing in the silent night air. A few moments later, the door to the mansion slowly opened, revealing a gap. Xiao Gao looked around, and then pushed himself up into the doorway, then closed noiselessly behind him. Hu Hai is in the study at the moment, holding a volume of bamboo slips. Seems to be reading. Seeing Xiao Gao's arrival, he put down the bamboo slips and had a warm smile on his face. However, in the depths of his eyes, it was hard to hide the touch of shady and calculating. Master's late-night visit must be important. Hu Hai slowly opened his mouth, his voice calm and deep. Xiao Gao bowed and said in a deep voice, I have indeed come here to tell you something. He paused, organized his words, and continued. Last night, the Heaven's Net expert Xianyu, whom I sent to the eldest prince's residence, as well as the 9 dead soldiers, have all disappeared. Hu Hai sniffed, his eyebrows slightly raised, but his face still maintained a calm smile. Oh, how could this happen? Xiao Gao nodded his head and narrated last night's events in detail. His tone was calm and detailed, as if he were recounting something perfectly normal. However, his eyes revealed deep concern and uneasiness. When Hu Hai heard what Zhao Gao said, a light of surprise flashed in his eyes, but he did not show it. The corners of his mouth rose slightly, like a smile, but in his heart, he found this matter quite interesting. When did the eldest prince's residence become a place of hidden dragons and crouching tigers? That Wen Zai, in the eyes of the public, has always been a playboy, all day long wandering around. This chapter is not finished. Please click the next page to continue reading. Idle and uninvolved in politics, he only knows to indulge in spending time and sex. His life always seemed to be accompanied by the dances of songstresses, the mellow aroma of fine wines, and the sound of dice on the gaming table. In the city of Inyang, his name is often closely associated with the rumors of those windy, flowery, rather than being compared to any heroes or heroines, civil and military. However, this seemingly untouchable dude, it actually made Zhao Gao's SkyNet experts return in defeat last night. You know, Xian Yu is a SkyNet first-class assassin, known for his ruthlessness and exceptional strength. He was ruthless and murderous, and never had a record of missing, and for this operation, he even led 9 dead soldiers to assist. Each one of them was above the Vajra realm, and could be considered an elite warrior under the Zhao experts. Such a lineup was enough to easily cope and win even against the fierce generals of the army. However, they folded in the eldest prince's residence last night. How could this not be shocking? How on earth did Ying Ziyou do it? Has he been hiding his strength? Or is there someone else in the house who can help? What is hidden in that house? Hu Hei played with the bamboo slip in his hand. The eyes were deep and focused, as if the whole world was cut off from him. Suddenly, a crisp shattering sound broke the momentary silence. It turned out that the maid had accidentally knocked over the lamp oil. The maid was so scared that her face turned pale, and she fell to her knees, apologizing. "Sir, spare your life. Sir, spare your life." The slave girl didn't mean it. Huey raised his head slightly, and looked toward the trembling maid, whose face was warm and his voice was gentle. "No harm done. Go down and be careful." The maid was like an amnesty and kowtowed in thanks before getting up and retreating. However, just at the moment she turned around, a glint of harsh cold light flashed in Hu Hai's eyes. He slammed his palm out, directly hitting the maid's back. Put! Blood spurted out of the maid's mouth, and she hit the wall hard before sliding to the ground and there was no more sound. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. The temple examination begins with a defense. Hui withdrew his palm and gently blew the dust on it. It was as if he had just swatted an insignificant fly. He still had a warm smile on his face, but the chill in his eyes was chilling. Zhao Gao stood on the side and witnessed the entire process, his face calm as ever. "My lord, this matter is not a small matter, and if the elder duke's residence really has an expert to help it, then the temple exams in 2 days. Hu Hai waved his hand to interrupt Zhao Gao's words and faintly said, "Master doesn't need to worry. My lord has his own plans for the temple examination." He stood up, paced to the window, stood with his arms folded, looked out at the dark night sky and, slowly, he said, "Whether or not Big Brother is hiding a secret, we'll know once we try it on the day of the temple test." As he said this, he suddenly turned his head, a wry smile on his face. That smile revealed an unspeakable coldness and cunning that made people shiver, and his eyes became glazed over, as if a sharp knife had been. The ability to penetrate all hypocrisy and lies. "Father is wise and has his own decision," he continued, his tone dripping with fervent admiration. "Even if it is really handed over to Big Brother or Fusu, it would have to be something they can catch." His words were full of confidence and arrogance, and his demeanor became flamboyant, with his head held high. The momentum is overwhelming. At this point, he paused, turned his head to look at Zhao Gao and the face became stoic once again. "What does master think?" "How?" Zhao Gao's heart was flabbergasted at his words. He knew that Hu Hai was reminding him not to act rashly. He bowed busily and said, "What your excellency has said is very true. It is the old minister who has been overly concerned." Hu Hai smiled slightly, turned around and sat back down in front of the case to pick up the bamboo slip and continue to read. Zhao Gao was secretly relieved when he saw this. He bowed and turned to exit the study. The night was still deep and silent. Calm was restored within the Hua residence. Yet underneath this calm, there are dark currents, a battle for the future of Great Qin. The curtain has been quietly drawn back. 2 days later, the morning sun was shining, and the morning sun was reflecting the sky. Above the courtroom, it has long been crowded with people, and the dukes are all dressed in fine clothes. "Come early and wait." They were talking in hushed tones, or with their eyes closed, but without exception, they all exuded an air of majesty and solemnity. The golden sunlight sprinkled above the gilded splendor of the court hall, and the 100 officials of Great Qin had already stood according to their ranks, waiting for the gentleman of the day. How come we haven't seen Elder Duke Ying Ziyou?" An official asked softly to the fellow officer beside him. "Yes, How could he be absent at such a critical moment? Another official responded with a frown. The eyes revealed disbelief and doubt. Snow, dressed in a suit of snow-white armor, like a blooming white lotus. Standing quietly at the side head of the courtroom. That armor was inlaid with a fine silver pattern that showed off both the woman's shapeliness, without losing the majesty of a military general. At his waist, a divine sword hung, and above the scabbard was carved with cloud patterns, transmitting a chilling aura. It was as if it could be sheathed and drink blood at any time. Her face was clear and beautiful, and her bright eyes were as deep as autumn water, flashing with wisdom. Between his eyebrows, there was a hidden heroic spirit, the wariness and unyieldingness that flowed from the bloodline of the god of slayers. This needs no introduction, and can be seen in the upright stance and the biting eyes. Above the court, 100 officials were gathered, but Bai Xue was like a bright pearl. Even in this crowded place, it was still hard to hide her splendor. She stood there, speechless, but with every subtle movement. All of them get the attention of those around them. Her presence seemed to be a unique scenery in this courtroom. Bai Xue's heart was also in waves at the moment. Her heart was burning with anxiety, and she kept glancing out of the courtroom. Expecting that familiar figure to suddenly appear. Could it be that Elder Duke is really, as rumor has it, not up to the task, and is backing out of the battle at this moment? An official of lower rank couldn't help but whisper. This statement immediately caused a burst of whispers from the surrounding officials. Some people nodded their heads in agreement, believing that Ying Ziye's usual playboy image had long been deeply rooted in people's hearts. The absence of this moment is but the exposure of its nature. There are also people who shake their heads and sigh. Although it is a dude, but after all, for the long, if you really give up the palace examination, then the future of Great Qin is in trouble. General Bai Xue, do you know why the Elder Duke has not yet arrived? An official who knows Snow well can't help but ask her about it. He knew that Bai Xue had a great relationship with Ying Ziye and might be able to learn some inside information from her. Bai Xue shook her head slightly and smiled bitterly. Truth be told, I also don't know why Brother Ziyi is late, but I believe he will never easily give up this opportunity to take the temple examination. Just as the 100 officials were murmuring and speculating, a sudden rush of footsteps came from outside the courtroom. That's Ying Ziyou, the eldest son of Great Qin. He was dressed in green, his sleeves fluttering gently with his steps, carrying an ineffable elegance. The face is handsome, with a calm and collected look between the brows, and the world is. This chapter is not finished. Please click the next page to continue reading. All the strife of the world could not shake him. He walked into the courtroom, each step firm and strong, the earth trembling beneath his feet. Xiao Xian lifted, as if he were a god, as if he were an exiled immortal who had descended to earth. The appearance of Ying Ziye instantly changed the atmosphere above the courtroom. The 100 officials stopped talking, their gazes revealing awe and curiosity. As they looked at this elder duke, they couldn't help but speculate in their hearts that, how much strength and wisdom does this normally unassuming dude hide? As for Bai Xue, standing at the side head of the courtroom, she was also looking at Ying Ziye with her eyes at the moment. There was a gleam of joy and love in her eyes, and also at this moment, she saw the hope for the future of Great Qin. She knows that Brother Ziyou is by no means a pool animal, and that today's palace examination, it will surely be the stage for him to show his true strength. His appearance instantly brought the murmurings above the courtroom to a screeching halt. All eyes were focused on him. Afterwards, the bells sounded loudly, and all the officials stood in solemnity, only to see the ancestral dragon dressed in the heavenly mandate Shin bird robe, majestic and incomparable, walk slowly up the hall. After he sat down, he swept his gaze around the courtiers and announced in a deep voice, today's temple examination is based on debates, and each of the dukes will show what they have learned in order to determine the highs and lows. When these words came out, the courtroom was silent. All eyes were focused on the gentleman. Fusu, although the second son, but the talent with obvious, naturally unshakable stand out. He bowed and said aloud, my son has a question that he would like to debate with all the brothers. Fusu stood in the center of the courtroom, his posture as straight as a pine, his face as calm as water. My son thinks that the way to rule a country is first and foremost in virtue. Fusu opened his mouth, and every word seemed to be well thought out. There is a Confucian saying, to govern with virtue is like the North Star, which resides in its place and is shared by all the stars. This is the basis for convincing people by virtue and ruling the country by virtue. He quoted from the classics and narrated the Confucian philosophy of governance. He emphasized the importance of the virtue of the monarch to the state, and believed that the monarch should lead by example, influence the people through their own moral cultivation so as to achieve the long-term stability of the country. End of this chapter. Chapter 11. The Analects of Confucius can still be like this? The people are the most important thing. The gods of earth and grain come second, and the king is the least important thing. Fusu continued to elaborate on his point. A monarch should always put the interests of the people first. This is the way to win the hearts of the people and stabilize the world. His words are earnest and logical. Each sentence is like a well-polished diamond in the rough, radiating wisdom. Although the other princes wanted to retort, under Fusu's successive arguments, I can't find the right words for a moment. The debate was in full swing, and with his superior intelligence and eloquence, Fusu, defending against the other males in a row. In every encounter, he was able to accurately catch the other party's loopholes and then convince them with reason. His quick thinking and logical clarity left everyone in awe. What Mr. Fusu said is very true. A courtier who practiced Confucianism as his art couldn't help but praise loudly. The Confucian concept of virtue in government is really a good recipe for governing the country. As the debate progressed, Fusu's popularity climbed rapidly above the court. The 100 officials nodded their heads and praised him for living up to his name as the eldest son. They looked at Fusu with respect and anticipation in their eyes, and it was as if he had seen the hope for the future of Great Qin. However, just when everyone thought that Fusu would secure the victory, a discordant voice, however, suddenly rang out. I only saw Ying Ziye stand up and snort at Fusu, saying, Fusu, Fusu, I think you've been reading stupidly. The moment Ying Ziye said this, a furor immediately rose above the courtroom. The 100 officials looked at each other with surprise and curiosity written all over their faces. How could they have ever imagined that this longtime son, who was usually notorious and only knew how to spend and drink, would? It's amazing that they would stand up and dissent at such a critical time. Ying Ziye's words seemed like a stone thrown into a calm lake, stirring up layers of ripples. The atmosphere in the courtroom instantly became subtle. The crowd's gazes took on a few colors of watching a good show. They all seemed to be expecting some kind of joke from the elder male. Li Si has always been calm and introverted. At this moment also could not help but show surprise. He wondered in his heart. This son has always been licentious and uninhibited. Why did he make such shocking remarks today? Could it be that this son really has something to offer and is hiding something deep? Bai Xue stood in the middle of the court class, her waist hanging the divine sword, her poise outstanding, and her heart full of confidence. With a smile on his face, she is well aware of her brother Ziyou's talent, and she also understands the wildness and uninhibitedness of his character. The other emperors, compared to brother Ziyou, are all like clouds in mud. Above the dragon platform, the ancestral dragon's majesty is heavenly. At the moment, he was looking slightly deeper into the eyes of his foppish eldest son. Above the courtroom, the gazes of the people were like knives and swords, pointing directly at Ying Ziye. However, he seems to be unaware of it, standing tall, without changing his face. The calmness and self-confidence emanating from its body is as firm as a rock. One has to be impressed. A hint of playfulness flashed in Fusu's eyes. He wanted to see what this normally disreputable brother could say. In his mind, although Ying Ziye was his royal brother and eldest son, but it's always been an off-the-wall dude. Standing out at this moment is nothing more than self-defeating. He smiled gently, and decided to give Ying Ziyou a chance. Let him make a fool of himself in public. And the atmosphere in the courtroom became eerie. Everyone's eyes were focused on Ying Ziye, waiting for his next statement. Ying Ziye, on the other hand, stood there with a calm demeanor. It was as if he didn't feel the strange gazes and atmosphere around him at all. He took a deep breath and prepared to make his point. Fusu, you intend to use Confucianism to discuss state policy. Let me ask you, have you ever read the Analects? Ying Ziyou inquired. Fusu sniffed and immediately snorted. And beside him, a group of Hongju also shook their heads and laughed. The Analects are the words of the sages. Since I have practiced Confucianism, how could I not have read them? Fusu was unimpressed. Laughing, he said, Oh, is Imperial brother not trying to test me on the Analects? Ying Ziye laughed out loud. Fusu, do you think that the Analects of Confucius is really what you think it is? The entire court, up and down, you cadre of Confucians, all read it wrong. When these words came out, the crowd was amazed. Reese's heart shook again at his words. He has always claimed to be knowledgeable and versatile, and although he is a legalist, he has also studied the Confucian classics. However, hearing what Ying Ziye said at this moment was like a thunderbolt from a clear sky, causing a moment of uncertainty in his heart. What does he want? Could he have actually subverted the Confucian classics? Bai Xue was also shaken in her heart. Though she was a general and not versed in scripture or history, she had dabbled in such enlightening readings as the Analects of Confucius. At this moment, listening to what Ying Ziye said, but it was as if a whole new door had been opened. It made her see sights she had never seen before. She couldn't help but be filled with curiosity and anticipation for her Ziyou brother in her heart. On the other hand, Ancestral Dragon's face was as calm as water, his gaze deep and unfathomable. He sat on top of the dragon platform and looked straight at Ying Ziyou. as if he wanted to see through to the depths of his heart. This chapter is not finished. Please click the next page to continue reading. But no one knows what is in his heart. Only his fingers were seen gently tapping on the dragon platform armrests, as if he was thinking about some important issue. The Confucians looked at each other with great confusion. Fusei gazed at Ying Ziye, and a wave of doubt couldn't help but well up in his heart. This big brother of his is usually notorious for nothing but spending and drinking. Never seen him have any great insights. Now he has gone so far as to speak out in the courtroom, questioning his own philosophy of virtue and government. What does Imperial brother mean by this? Fusu asked in a deep voice. The analects are simple and easy to understand. How can you read them incorrectly? Even a 3-year-old child can practice. When Fusu said this, all the Confucians nodded and agreed. They thought that what Fusu said was very true, and that the Analects of Confucius, as a classic work of Confucianism, was simple and easy to understand. It is a must-read for children's enlightenment. Ying Ziye actually questioned the reasoning of the Analects, which was simply a blatant provocation of Confucian doctrine. However, Ying Ziye was unmoved. He retorted in a loud voice, "Joke, let me ask you, if you use virtue to politicize the world, so what is virtuous government?" Fusu pondered, explaining, "Naturally, it is to convince people with virtue, and a gentleman is not a weapon with a heart for the world. Focusing on benevolence, righteousness, and virtue, the world will naturally prosper." Ying Ziye laughed out loud, his hands behind his back, and said, "In my brother's opinion, the meaning of a gentleman not having a weapon is that the truly strong people don't bother to use weapons to kill each other. Extreme strength to kill each other is considered merciful." What? At this moment, it was as if a storm had risen above the courtroom. Ying Ziye's deviant words were like a thunderbolt that exploded in the ears of the 100 officials. It shook them to their core. The entire court was shocked. They stared at Ying Ziyou with wide eyes, not daring to believe it. This usually notorious, spendthrift son of the elder duke, he dared to openly question the Confucian classics in the courtroom and interpret them in this way. This is simply unthinkable. Li Ci's pupils earthquake, full of horror. This can still be like this? End of this chapter. Chapter 12, The Confucian Mentality Has Collapsed. Bai Xue snorted a laugh, barely able to hold it back, abruptly realizing that this was the courtroom. Rushing to put on a serious face. Even the first emperor on the dragon stage was shocked by Ying Ziyou's words and opened his mouth wide. Duke Fusu, Dr. Chun Yu, and other Confucians in the courtroom, even more so. Her face turned red with anger at Ying Ziye's words. They thought that Ying Ziyou's words were simply an insult to the teachings of Confucianism. It was a provocation to them, the disciples of Confucianism. If it wasn't for Ying Ziye's status as the eldest son of the emperor, they would have cursed him long ago. When Ying Ziyou looked around at the angry, shocked, and puzzled gazes of the. Instead, a surge of bravado rose in his heart. Any questions? Do you have any questions? He looked around the courtroom and there were a few provocations in his gaze. He knew that his words had aroused the wrath of the people, but he did not have the slightest intention of retreating. Bull *******. Simply nonsense, Duke Fuso angrily rebuked. He considered Ying Ziye's words to be nothing short of blasphemy against the teachings of Confucianism and an insult to the wisdom of the sages. The words of the saints are about loyalty, filial piety, etiquette, and modesty. It is degrading for you to be so arrogant and mouthy. Dr. Chun Yu also couldn't help but stand up and accuse. Ying Ziye heard this, but he shook his head and laughed. Haha, what ignorance. Confucianism is so interpreted by such weak people that Confucius would shake his head if he were to see it in heaven. This smile of his instantly caused Chun Yu to become enraged. He glared angrily at Ying Ziyou, as if he wanted to eat this dude alive. What is the prince laughing at? Did the old minister say something wrong? Ying Ziye stopped laughing, his eyes flashing sharply. Wrong. Of course it's wrong. You only know how to read and study to death, but you don't know the true reasoning of the sages. You guys have been interpreting it wrong from the beginning. The son said, I am 10 and 5, and I am 30. What that means is that it takes 30 people to make me stand up and fight. 40 and no confusion. It means that if 40, I rush up to fight without any hesitation at all. 50 know their destiny, and 50 will be beaten by me into thinking they have met their destiny. 60 years. If 60 people whisper good things in my ear, I'll only be able to take the edge off and stop hitting. 70 at will. If 70 people surrounded me, I'd be able to kill them indiscriminately as I pleased. His words were like a heavy hammer, hitting the hearts of the Confucians hard. They looked at Ying Ziyou in shock. It was as if he was getting to know the normally notorious Chang Gongzi for the first time. It never occurred to them that this dude was able to say such treacherous and impetuous things. For a while, silence fell over the courtroom. That original clamor of arguments and accusations had all disappeared at this moment. The Only the sound of the people's breathing echoed in the empty hall. The 100 officials looked at each other with shock and horror on their faces. Is that how it was originally explained? They were shocked by Ying Ziye's deviant, yet profound words. Li Si's pupils contracted, greatly shocked, and then stroked his whiskers and thought. His face was grave. This son's words, though seemingly wild and perverse, are nonetheless profoundly sensible. The way of Confucius and Mencius has always been honored by the Confucians in the court, but today it was broken by Ying Ziyou's words. Quite a novelty. Li Si cannot help but sigh in his heart. This son is not the old days of the playboy. Really have too much wisdom. Snow was also deeply alarmed, but more cheerful and amused, with the same thesis. Interpreting it from Brother Ziyou's mouth, it was so unique. She stood in the midst of the ashram, doing her best to stifle her laughter. A pair of bright eyes always gazed at Ying Ziye, the bottom of her eyes showing adoration and joy. Ancestral dragon sat on the dragon platform, his gaze like a torch. He knew that although this son's words were crazy, they were not empty. After all, when you think about it, there really is some truth to those words. He couldn't help but re-examine Ying Ziye in his heart. This son may be able to become a great weapon. On the other hand, Fusu and Chunyue, as well as all the Confucians, were furious. Their faces were grim and their eyes were wide open. They had thought they were learned and insightful enough to meet any challenge or question. Yet at this moment, surprisingly speechless at the royal eldest son's explanation. It made them feel incredibly ashamed and angry. Chunyu's eyes widened as he stared angrily at Ying Ziye. It was as if they were going to eat this dude alive. However, he opened his mouth, but realized that he couldn't find any words to retort. The anger and dissatisfaction in his heart seemed to be instantly crushed by Ying Ziyou's words. Only endless frustration remains. Duke Fusu's face was also blue as he clenched his fists and tried to control his emotions. He knew that at the moment he had lost his old calm and collected self and, completely enraged by Ying Ziyou's words, everyone was silent, as if waiting for something. They know that this debate today has gone beyond the original scope of it's turned into a battle for the future of Great Qin. This chapter is not finished. Please click the next page to continue reading. The meeting of minds. And in this exchange, Ying Ziye had undoubtedly gained the upper hand. Above the courtroom, Ying Ziye engaged in a heated debate with Fusu and the Confucians. Ying Ziyou cleverly quotes Confucian texts, yet it is original and counterintuitive. He talked about the way of the human master's defense of his subordinates, and how he should not be too merciful. The voice echoed through the empty hall as he spoke generously. Although Confucianism advocates benevolent governance, it must also be known that benevolent governance is not a policy of appeasement. If a lord is too merciful, his subjects will become contemptuous. And how can the state establish its authority? Ying Ziye's gaze was like a torch as he scanned the crowd in the courtroom and continued. There is a saying in the Analects of Confucius that a gentleman who is not heavy is not powerful. What is the meaning of this statement? It is not that a gentleman must be harsh, but that a gentleman who beats a man must hit him hard and, otherwise you can't build prestige. He turned his words around and cited an example. In the past, the Duke of Zhou assisted King Chang, although he practiced benevolent government, but he also has the vigor to wield his sword against the floating clouds. King Chang is a young man, and the Duke of Zhou is the regent. If there are any traitors or thieves in rebellion, will the Duke of Zhou be appeased by mercy? It is bound to be heavy-handed, as a warning to others. This is a truly benevolent policy. Ying Ziye's words were like a boulder thrown into a lake, stirring up 1,000 waves. The courtroom was in an uproar. The Confucians looked at each other in dismay. They had never thought that the Confucian classics could be interpreted in such a way. The 100 officials were dumbfounded and appalled, and Fusu was even more frowning. He was well aware of the weight of Ying Ziye's words, also aware of the threat it poses to them. However, Ying Ziye did not stop. His words were like a blade, and he continued to wield it. And above the courtroom, there was no one who could compete with him. He quoted the Confucian classics, but he did everything he could to surprise and staggeringly, and yet it seems to imply some kind of ineffable truth. I only heard him say in a loud voice, Confucianism says, if 3 people walk together, there must be a teacher. But I thought that this was not the intention. Imagine 3 people traveling on the road, and if I were to step in and teach them a lesson, will there not be one person who is convinced of my martial arts and worships me as a master? End of this chapter. Chapter 13. The doctor is a great scholar, but he does not know the true face of Confucius? This statement was a shock to the audience. All Confucians look at each other, although the heart feels wrong, but cannot find a refutation. The 100 officials gulped, never having heard that the Analects had such a layer of meaning. Li Si, Zhao Gao, and Zhu Long all froze. Bai Xue cackled with laughter, but did not dare to make a sound, and looked at her own Ziyou brother with great delight. The fangirls were in the dark. Ying Ziye added, if you hear the word in the morning, You can die in the evening. What is the meaning of this statement? I thought that the morning is the day, the evening is the evening. When I heard of your abode in the morning, I traveled and struck it in the evening. After your death, it is only then that my way can be stretched. These words are even more appalling, but Ying Ziye said it with a straight face. It is as if this is the original intention of Confucianism. The more he spoke, the more energized he became, and continued. Confucianism also says that those who know are happy with the water, and those who are benevolent are happy with the mountains. That's not true either. Is not the one who knows more than to enjoy the water? Those who know martial arts show their courage by breaking the current with their strength. Does a benevolent man not only enjoy the mountains? A benevolent martial artist opens a mountain with his bare hands, in order to exercise his body, and Fong shows his benevolence. The moment these words came out, the courtroom was even more silent. Ying Ziye's words swept through the entire courtroom like a raging storm. The 100 officials' jaws dropped and they were speechless. It never occurred to them that the Confucian classics could be so misinterpreted, and by him, every word of it made sense. There is simply no way to refute it. Is it true that the words of the saints are so? Could it be that the way of Confucius and Mencius described has always been the way of kings and rulers? At this moment, Ying Ziye, in the eyes of the crowd, was no longer the playboy. Instead, it was a madman full of wisdom and courage. His words, though deviant, seemed to contain some ineffable truth. The crowd couldn't help but begin to re-examine this elder duke in their hearts, pondering the deeper meaning of his words. Xue'er was furious at his words. Slapping the table and pointing at Ying Ziye, he rebuked, "Ignorant harlot, how dare you distort the words of the sages in such a way? If the Lord of Man is merciful, then it is for the welfare of the world. How can he practice tyranny, as you say?" At these words, Xue'er was even more furious, but in his rage, he suddenly realized that he had misspoken. When he looked around, he saw that all the 100 officials were looking at each other, and his heart tightened. And on top of the dragon platform, the first emperor's face was stoic, his dragon's eyes narrowed, and a faint pressure of power that covered in the middle of the hall, pointing directly in the direction of him. Xue'er knew that his words had violated the taboo, and that the Ying Ziyou in front of him, but the eldest son of the Emperor of Qin, can't help but secretly regret it. Snow, on the other hand, had been silently following the debate in the courtroom. She heard that Xue'er had made a lot of accusations against Ying Ziye, and even disrespected the eldest son of the emperor. A chill surged through his heart. She knew that Xue'er had always been dissatisfied with Ying Ziyou. However, I did not expect it to dare to be so reckless in the courtroom. She glanced at Xue'er with a cold gaze. Her heart had already developed a few points of disgust and vigilance towards him. Every word of Xue'er's was like a sharp arrow pointing directly at Ying Ziye. A trace of imperceptible coldness flashed through Bai Xue's eyes, and her fingers tightened slightly. As if suppressing an inner rage. She was well aware of Ying Ziye's intelligence, and even more so, she understood that what he said and did today all had their own deep meaning and considerations. Yet, Xue'er attacked him so indiscriminately. This was very upsetting to Snow. Her face was gloomy, and it seemed to her that the words and actions of this Confucian scholar at this moment, it had already crossed the boundaries of an academic argument and turned into a personal attack on Ying Ziye. She won't allow anyone to slander her brother Ziyou like that, especially in this courtroom. In plain sight, a strong desire for protection surged in Snow's heart. She wanted to stand up in defense of brother Ziyou, wanted to expose Xue'er's hypocrisy and prejudice. However, she knew she couldn't do that. Her identity and position did not allow her to openly confront Xue'er in this courtroom, so she could only hide her anger in her heart and, expressing his displeasure and anger with an icy stare, she believed that brother Ziyou would be able to deal with these people and prove his talent and wisdom, and she, in her own way, was going to quietly support him and watch over him. The atmosphere above the courtroom became more and more tense. Ying Ziyou's argument with Fusu, although it did not directly involve the battle for the throne. However, the forces and ideas behind them are already in opposition to each other. In this seemingly calm debate in the courtroom, in fact, has been the dark current, the wind in clouds. Ying Ziye's words were sharp, as if a sharp blade had been unsheathed, pointing directly at Confucianism's sore spot. He laughed coldly. The doctor is a great scholar, but he doesn't know the true face of Confucius. In the past, Confucius, the giant of Lu, was 8 feet tall, stout and wondrous, and powerful. The muscles are solidly knotted. He is not just a scribe, but a powerful martial artist. He looked around and, seeing the astonished faces of the 100 officials, continued. Confucius established the school of Confucianism, setting up 72 halls, collecting 3,000 disciples, and using whirling tongues as rules. This is not child's play. His strength is so great that he can lift the gates of the country, and he wears a sword at his waist, and walks This chapter is not finished. Please click the next page to continue reading. The Jianghu, to convince people with virtue. If anyone does not listen to him, he will rise up with his sword drawn, and overcome him by force. 100 officials heard. All of them were moved, heart and soul shocked as if struck by thunder. They have always known only that Confucius was the sage Wen Xian, the founder of the Confucian school of thought, a model of morality and learning. It never occurred to me that this sage had such a martial side. In their imagination, Confucius was originally supposed to be a gentle and modest old man. With a book in his hand, he teaches. However, at this moment, Wen Zai's description allowed them to see a whole new image of Confucius. An 8-foot-tall, lanky, strange warrior. A big man, whose waist was covered with a sword and whose gaze was like a torch. He led 3,000 disciples, who also wore swords hanging from their waists, and traveled among the nations, convincing them by reasoning that, deterring the enemy by force. Who would dare to disobey such a Confucius? Who dares to fight against it? The crowd felt a surge of trepidation at the thought of the image. It was as if they saw the heroic posture of Confucius rising up with his sword drawn and wielding it to cut down the enemy. It was as if I heard his powerful voice echoing in my ears. I am Kong Chiu, the one who convinces by virtue. At this moment, the 100 officials were convinced of Wen Zai's words. They began to re-examine the status and influence of the Confucian school and Confucius, beginning to realize that the Confucian way is not just about the genteel aspects of benevolence, righteousness, propriety, wisdom and faith. More than that, it has its brave and stalwart side. Such a realization gave them a more comprehensive and in-depth understanding of and reverence for Confucianism. Seeing such a strong reaction from the crowd, Ying Ziyou continued, the way of Confucianism. Not only does it preach benevolence, righteousness, courtesy, wisdom and faith, but it also has its side of bravery. Let this be a lesson to us. We must not know only literature but not martial arts. The moment these words came out, the courtroom was even more silent. End of this chapter. Chapter 14, Today's Courtroom. Ying Ziye is sharp. Above the court, the 100 officials looked at each other, but their hearts were turned upside down. They knew that from now on, they could no longer underestimate Confucianism or Confucius. Ying Ziye's shocking words, straight to the courtroom above the jaws of the crowd. Speechless, those who usually regard themselves as Confucian and elegant Confucians are even more furious at this moment. Their faces are green, and yet there is no way to refute it. Had they ever imagined that the Confucian classics could be interpreted in such a subversive manner? However, not everyone in the courtroom is a Confucian. Those non-Confucian officials, however, are now watching with great interest. Some even couldn't help but laugh out loud. They sighed in their hearts, worthy of being the #1 dude of Great Qin, with such deviant remarks. And only he can say it. But after laughing, they couldn't help but begin to reflect. Although Ying Ziye's words were absurd, upon closer examination, they didn't seem entirely unreasonable. It is true that there are many debatable points in the Confucian classics. It's just that no one dares to be so outspoken on a regular basis. At this moment, Chen Yuyu was even more infuriated to the point of vomiting blood. He, as a representative of the Confucian school of, it is most impermissible for anyone to show any disrespect to the Confucian classics on a regular basis. However, today, Ying Ziye criticized the Confucian classics to the core in front of him. How can he stand this? Only Chen Yuyu's face was pale and a trace of blood seeped out from the corner of his mouth. He pointed a trembling hand at Ying Ziye, but was half unable to utter a single word. In the end, he could only close his eyes helplessly and let out a long sigh to the sky. The vertical sun is not enough to plan with. Zhao Gao stood in a corner of the courtroom. His face, which was always deep, showed a rare look of surprise at this moment. The Ying Ziye in his eyes has always been a playboy, not asking about politics. All day long it's all about wind and flowers and beauty and drunkenness. But today, it was as if he was a different person. Between those words, although still with a few frivolous, but more is sharp as a knife. Hu Hai, on the other hand, was sitting on the sidelines with an interested look on his face. He still had a cynical look about him. Every now and then, he laughed softly, seemingly mocking Ying Ziye's arrogance. However, his gaze, as sharp and deep as a cheetah's, stared at Ying Ziye, and it seemed to be trying to find something out of him. He knew that the seemingly foppish older brother had another side to him that was unknown to him, and this side of him will perhaps be a major obstacle in his future bid for the throne. The first emperor was seated on the dragon platform, his posture majestic, sword eyebrow and starry eyes, divine light convergence. Between the looks, it was like the stars were shining brightly, and people did not dare to look directly at it. In ancestral dragon's memory, Ying Ziye had always been the unquestioning, debauched dude. He had been disappointed countless times by the lack of success of this firstborn son, and had even had thoughts of abandoning him. However, Today's Ying Ziye showed him a very different side. Ying Ziye stood above the courtroom, though still with a bit of frivolity. But the words are as sharp as they come. He quoted from the classics, but with a twist, combining the Confucian classics with his own ideas. A new image of the human lord was presented to the crowd. That kind of confidence and demeanor was something that Ancestral Dragon had never seen in Ying Ziye before. Ancestral Dragon's heart couldn't help but ripple. He was amazed at the change in Winzy Knights. Even more surprised that this dude could say something so thought-provoking, not without a dark sigh. If this son had not been a dude in the past, how could he be so sharp today? Yes, it's because of the dude that Ying Ziye used to be. It's what makes the change in him today all the more shocking. Zulan knew that this eldest son had not always been like this, that he had been lost, that he had sunk, but now he has finally found his way and is starting to show his own light. At this moment, the Ancestral Dragon's view of Ying Ziye changed drastically. He no longer sees him as the ungrateful dude that. Instead, he began to see him as a potential royal son with the potential to take on a great role. He knew that the eldest son had a lot of honing to do. But at least he has taken the most important step. Above the courtroom, there was a momentary silence. Although Ying Ziye has always had the reputation of being a playboy, but at this moment, he is using his sharp words to press the crowd. It left the entire court with jaws agape and speechless. Bai Xue stood in a corner of the courtroom, a strange light flickering in her eyes. She's always known of Brother Ziyou's talent, but I did not expect him to be able to make such a splash in the courtroom today. The heart couldn't help but praise it. Worthy of my brother Ziyou. Look at this hall full of civil and military ministers, the 3 princes and 9 secretaries, but no one can compete with you. At that moment, Zulong's gaze was as deep as an abyss, slowly sweeping over the people in the courtroom. It eventually settled on Reese. He leaned in slightly, an undeniable majesty in his voice. Reese, how do you feel about this? Li Si, the former Confucian scholar who later. This chapter is not finished. Please click the next page to continue reading. But the courtier who became a great sage of the law, came out and paid his respects. He lowered his eyes, hiding the sparkle in them, and his voice was steady and strong. Your Majesty, I have something to say. He raised his head, his gaze looking straight at the Ancestral Dragon, and spoke without humbling himself. Ying Ziye's words today. It's shocking, but it makes sense. The Confucian classics, of course, are fundamental to our governance, but times have changed and adaptations are needed. Ying Ziyou's ability to interpret the classics from this novel perspective is truly remarkable. Li Si's words reveal a slight dissatisfaction with Confucian scholars, although he is of Confucian origin, but those who only know how to stick to the classics, do not know how to change. The Confucian scholars have always been a little disliked. In his view, Confucian learning is certainly profound, but if it fails to keep pace with the times and respond to the current situation, it is like a pool of stagnant water which is of no use. And the deeper reason was the bad blood between him and Fusu, that second son of the emperor, who was regarded by all as the choice of the crown prince. The relationship with Reese, however, was not harmonious. Li Si was well aware of Fusu's esteem for Confucianism, and if Fusu became the crown prince, the future dynasty of the Confucianism will surely become more powerful. This was not a good thing for Li Si, the great sage of the law. Therefore, when Zulong asked him what he thought of Ying Ziyou, without hesitation, Reese chose to praise it. He didn't genuinely appreciate Ying Ziye's foppish ways. Rather, he was interested in Ying Ziyou's unique interpretation of the Confucian classics. In his opinion, this may be an opportunity to break the monopoly of Confucianism and gain more say for legalism. Li Si's words landed in silence above the courtroom. Everyone could see what was on Li Si's mind, but no one dared to speak up. Only the Ancestral Dragon's gaze remained as deep as the sea, making it impossible to guess what was in his mind. Only his voice echoed within the great hall. Majestic and deep, I will ask another question. You answer. Try to ask. How to govern the world, in order to secure the people and solidify the country? End of this chapter. Chapter 15. My son thought that my father had killed too little. At these words, the entire court bowed and pondered. And in the midst of this solemnity, Fusu was again the first to break the silence. Perhaps he also understood that he was at a disadvantage in the debate with Ying Ziye just now and was greatly humiliated, trying to take the opportunity to wrestle back the game. He steadily stepped out of the queue, a gorgeous suit setting off his upright posture, and respectfully bowed to the first emperor. Father, Fusu's voice was clear and firm, echoing above the courtroom. My son thought that should the world be governed by Confucian doctrines? He spoke frankly, as if these 4 words were the only truth in governing the country and never changed. He took a deep breath, as if to pour out all the scriptures in his belly. The so-called benevolence and righteousness are the basis of virtuous governance comes first. If you administer benevolence to the people will favor it. And if you exercise virtuous rule in the world will admire it. Light and thin taxes to relieve the people's strength, and light corvée to ease the people's hardship. When the people live and work in peace and contentment, the country will naturally prosper. When the ruler and the people are of one mind, the world will naturally be at peace. Every word of Fusu reveals a deep-rootedness and firm belief in Confucianism. Above the courtroom, the ministers listened to Fusu's exposition, some nodding in agreement, some secretly pondering, while the ancestral dragon sat expressionlessly on the dragon platform, his gaze deep and inscrutable. In the end, he nodded slightly, not commenting on Fusu's answer. Instead, his gaze turned to Ying Ziye and said in a deep voice, "Ziye, what do you think?" Ying Ziye stepped out, the corner of his mouth hooked into an unruly smile. His voice was loud and clear, echoing in every corner of the courtroom. "Father, my son thinks that the world should be governed by whirling words. This statement has been made, and a stone has stirred up 1,000 waves." Above the court hall, the civil and military officials looked at each other. Whispering sounds like a tidal wave. As we all know, the Analects of Confucius is a collection of quotations from the sage Confucius, containing the essence of Confucianism. However, when it came out of Ying Ziye's mouth, it seemed to carry a bit of playfulness and uninhibitedness, making people unable to grasp its true intentions. When the crowd was puzzled, they only saw that Ying Ziye was in a calm demeanor, with an indescribable smile hanging at the corner of her mouth. He didn't seem to care about the commotion in the courtroom, just quietly waiting for the first emperor's reaction. And the ancestral dragon also stared with a frown in his heart. However, remembering Ying Ziyou's unique interpretation of the Analects earlier, curiosity arose in his heart again. So patiently, he said, "And you unfolded it." Ying Ziye smiled slightly and began to elaborate on his philosophy. As the saying goes, the left fist is for benevolence, and the right fist is for etiquette. To match the sword is called virtue. To match the bow is called reason. To rule the world, we should convince people with virtue and teach them with propriety. When these words came out, the crowd listened to them in a cloud of uncertainty. However, the ancestral dragon was a flash of light in his eyes. Seemingly understanding what Ying Ziye meant, he asked in a deep voice, "What is the meaning of this? Speak plainly." Ying Ziye looked straight into the first emperor's gaze and said fearlessly, "Father has killed too few." The words fell above the courtroom like a thunderclap. The civil and military officials were horrified, and the voice of discussion rose like a tidal wave. Waves echoed through the gilded hall. Everyone was staring at Ying Ziyou with fear, as if they were seeing a ghost. "I can't believe that this wild and paradoxical statement came from a prince." For a while, the atmosphere was grave. The people only felt their hearts sinking, as if a huge stone was pressing on their chests, taking their breath away. They didn't dare to imagine how ancestral dragon would deal with this bold and arrogant eldest son, much less dare to speculate on what kind of political turmoil lies behind this statement. Ying Ziye, however, seemed to be oblivious to all of this, as he still stood in the center of the courtroom with his head held high, with that unruly smile on his face. His gaze was firm and open. "I say what I think. Why should I fear the eyes of the world?" However, to everyone's surprise, the first emperor was not furious. He was seated on top of the dragon platform, his deep gaze locked onto Ying Ziye. There was an elusive glint in his eyes. Just as the crowd thought a storm was approaching, the first emperor suddenly let loose a loud laugh, and that laughter was loud and bold, echoing in every corner of the courtroom. "Ha ha, what a kill too little. Ziyou, you really didn't let me down." The 100 officials were shocked by these words. They looked at each other with fear and incomprehension in their eyes. His Majesty is not angry? Instead, he praised Ying Ziye's words? What the hell is going on here? For a while, the courtroom was silent, with only the laughter of the first emperor echoing. All of them felt only anxiety, as if they were in the midst of a turbulent sea. At any moment it could be swallowed by a huge wave. They didn't dare to speculate on the Supreme Being's mind, much less say half a word. Ying Ziye, however, seemed to have anticipated all of this. He was still standing in the center of the courtroom in a dignified manner, with that unruly smile on his face. His eyes met with the beginners, as if in this moment there was a certain wonderful resonance between the minds of father and son. The 100 officials were trembling with fear. This chapter is not finished. Please click the next page to continue reading. They knew that this courtroom was no longer the one they were familiar with. The appearance of Ying Ziye was like a huge stone thrown into a calm lake, stirring up 1,000 waves. This temple examination, the dragon fights and tigers fight. The waves are magnificent, yet the victory and defeat of. But it's always been as elusive as a cloudy mountain. All the officials paid attention to the emperor and wanted to see the face of heaven to know the direction of the Holy Spirit. But Emperor Shihuang was unfathomable. In the end, it was not made clear. However, he saw the Supreme Being slowly get up. His dragon robe flicked, and His Majesty was heavenly. His gaze was like a torch as he swept the courtroom for a week. His voice steady and strong. Today's temple examination. It is good that you have expressed your views. However, the way to rule a country is not something that can be accomplished overnight, and requires deep thought and careful planning. After he spoke, he gently waved his hand, and the chamberlain then announced in a loud voice, "Retreat from the court." This order was like heavenly music, causing the 100 officials to wake up as if from a dream. They bowed and saluted, and then went out in a line. But in their hearts, they were turning over, and it was difficult to calm down. This temple test, although there is no clear winner or loser, but everyone knows that Ying Ziyou's shocking speech, it has already left a colorful mark on the court. His Majesty's attitude is even more inscrutable, as if underneath this calm courtroom, dark currents are stirring, and a bigger storm is coming. At sunset, the majestic and atmospheric palace is even more solemn in the afterglow of the setting sun. The Prime Minister, Li Si, was about to step out of the lofty courtroom, when his heart rose and, Judas was recalling the heated debate between Wen Zai and Fu Su in the courtroom today. I think that the usually cynical eldest son of the emperor, but today, in the courtroom, the mouth of the, quoting scripture, the implication of what he said sounds like Confucianism as a compliment to legalism. It is the only way to rule the country. This is right in line with Ri's philosophy. It seems that this imperial eldest son, as he expected, is not so simple. Suddenly a rush of footsteps was heard from far and near, and a eunuch came panting and, the shrill voice echoed in the empty palace. His Majesty has decreed that the Prime Minister is requested to enter the Zhengtai Palace immediately for an audience. Ri sniffed, and immediately understood that this is His Majesty's desire to speak with him privately about what was discussed in the court today. End of this chapter. Chapter 16, the Long Duke might be pretending to be a pig in a poke. It's time. Led by the eunuchs, Li Si passed through a corridor, over a palace, and, finally, we came to the front of the Zhengtai Palace. Just see the palace door closed. Both sides of the guards stood in solemnity, seem unusually mysterious and solemn. Reese took a deep breath and calmed himself, then lifted his steps and walked through the palace gates and, go and meet that supreme emperor. Inside the palace of Zhengtai, the ambergris incense curled up and its fragrance was so rich that it filled the entire hall. Beaded curtains hang lightly, concealing the luxury and mystery of the interior. Zheng has changed out of his imperial robes and is sitting in front of the case. More than anything else, his dignified but idle demeanor was evident. He was seated in front of the case, holding a luscious jade cup, in which the agar and jade liquid was sparkling and, reflecting his deep and composed gaze. "Lease meets your Majesty." Li Si stepped into the hall and bowed respectfully in greeting. His voice echoed in the empty hall, appearing unusually clear and solemn. Zheng raised his head at the sound of the voice, and his gaze fell on Li Si through the low-hanging bead curtain. He smiled faintly, and that smile revealed an unspeakable depth of meaning that, it's as if they can see through all the falsehoods and pretenses. He gently raised his hand, signaling for Li Si to be excused and given a seat. "Love the ministers, give them a seat." Zheng's voice was calm and majestic, revealing an unquestionable power. Although his words were simple, they had an aura of a king's reign. "What do you think of Ziyou's remarks above the courtroom today, Iching?" Zheng asked softly. Li Si's heart fluttered, knowing that this was His Majesty testing his attitude. He pondered for a moment and said slowly, "The emperor's eldest son is talented, but his words are sharp and unconventional and indeed kingly. I have observed his words and deeds, and I also feel that he is not a pool animal." Zheng laughed at his words and slapped the table. "I, too, see the kingly momentum in Zai. Think of the year. When I first ascended the throne, it was the same. Decisions such as books with the same text, cars with the same tracks, and the building of the Great Wall were misunderstood and disapproved of. But I, at last, have become great." Seeing this, Li Si arched his hand in agreement and said in a deep voice, "Your Majesty's wisdom and martial arts are comparable to those of very many people. The eldest son of the emperor is also such a character. However, outsiders all view the imperial eldest son as a fop. I dare to guess, this may just be the appearance that the emperor's eldest son is deliberately showing." As soon as these words came out, a dazzling light erupted from Zheng's eyes. He stared closely at Li Si and asked in a deep voice, "What is the meaning of this statement? By the Secretary of Love?" Li Si smiled slightly and did not answer directly, but asked in return, "What does your Majesty think?" After pondering for a moment, Zheng slowly said, "If that's true, then Zai has a deep heart. It's beyond the reach of ordinary people. I, for one, would like to try him out myself." After saying that, a hint of majesty flashed through the supreme being's eyes. It seemed that he already had a plan in mind. "Tianji Pavilion. This place is like a dream. 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 From afar, it looks like a mirage, floating above the sea of clouds, drifting indefinitely. Fascinating. Its potential towering into the clouds. Layers and layers, jeweled buildings. Brilliant. The eaves and corners are flying. The carved beams and paintings are skillful and beautiful. Climbing up to the pavilion and looking out, only to feel the sea of clouds, as if in a fairyland. The sea breeze and the clouds are even more refreshing, forgetting the worries of the world. The furnishings in the cabinet are all extraordinary. Pearl curtains, green curtains, jade platforms, beautiful, in which, as if isolated from the world, into another time and place. The atmosphere in the pavilion, mysterious and solemn. Tai, the sect of Yin and Yang, lives in a deep place and is hard to find. It is rumored that he looks like a celestial being, but no one has been able to see him in person, and only from the sound of his majestic voice. A slight glimpse. Its arts and crafts, through the heavens and through the earth. Yin, Yang and the 5 elements are all within its grasp. When he raises his hands and throws his feet, he can attract the power of heaven and earth. The wind and clouds change their color, and the mountains and rivers are shaken. Its wisdom is like the sea, insight into the mysteries of all things, can change the fate against the heavens. Set the situation. He was sitting under a star, surrounded by silence, except for an ancient lamp in front of his case. A faint firelight wavered. That firelight reflected his deep face, as if he were a stone statue, calm and majestic. Immovable as a mountain. Yuxian stepped in lightly, her arrival seeming to break the silence of the chamber. As she walked, she brought up a delicate breeze of fragrance that was light and persistent and, like her character, she is gentle and tough. Just see this woman's posture, clear and beautiful, just like the Lingbo fairy, floating out of the world. Eyebrows like the distant mountains, eyes like autumn water, lips like red sand, skin like white jade. Every move reveals an extraordinary temperament. This woman, the protector of the Inyang family, is proficient in the art of astrology, and can see into the heavens and foretell the future. Its techniques are marvelous and unfathomable. Whenever night fell, she would climb to the top of the Tianji pavilion and look up to the heavens. This chapter is not finished. Please click the next page to continue reading. Observe the stars to divine good and bad fortune. Her figure looked lonely and mysterious in the moonlight, as if cut off from the world. Talk only to the stars. Her voice was as wispy as silk, as if it came from the heavens and, yet it clearly reached Tai Chi's ears, like a morning bell or a drum, awakening his deepest thoughts. My lord, Yuxian called out softly, a hint of awe and dependence in her voice. Tai Chi nodded slightly as a response. His gaze was still deep, as if he could see through all the illusions in the world. He knew where Yuxian was coming from, but did not rush to speak, instead letting her make her own statement. In this darkened chamber, the 2 men sat and stood, one in the light and one in the dark. Today, in the courtroom, the emperor's eldest son, Ying Ziye, spoke in shocking terms, and was a different person than in the past. Yuxian told all about today's matters in the courtroom, with a few unspeakable meanings in his tone. Hearing this, Tai's eyes flashed and asked with interest, "Oh, is there actually such a thing? Ying Ziye has always been known as a playboy. Why is he behaving like this today?" Yuxian shook her head and said, "I have not been informed of the reason for this. I just heard that he made a big speech in the courtroom and even drew a big laugh of appreciation from the first emperor." Tai pondered for a moment, and a deep light flashed in his eyes. He slowly said, "If there is no one behind Ying Ziyou, with his strength alone, it's hard to do so. Perhaps there are forces, unknown to us behind this manipulation." Yuxian nodded her head and concurred. "What your excellency said is very true. Ying Ziyou's performance today, it is indeed a far cry from the old days. If our Inyang family can help him, perhaps after he ascends to the throne, it can help us in our quest for that long life." When Tai heard this, the light in his eyes became even more brilliant. He said in a deep voice, "This matter needs to be considered in the long run. Although Ying Ziye has the power of a king, but above the court, lumpy clouds, one wrong step could lead to total destruction. We need to plan carefully." Yuxian nodded her head in response, but in her heart, she was intensely interested in Ying Ziye. She knew that there was bound to be an unknown secret hidden in this imperial eldest son, and this secret will perhaps be the key to the Inyang family's pursuit of the Great Tao. End of this chapter. Chapter 17, the Inyang clan's grand invitation to the Long Duke's Tianji Pavilion. Inside the 18th prince's residence, the aroma of the book was dense, only to see Hua flipping through the pages of the book as he, while picking up the exquisite pastries on the case from time to time and bringing them into his mouth, he chewed and swallowed slowly, his disbelief overflowing. However, those eyes, hidden behind the narrow phoenix eyes, flashed with a sharp, knife-like light that, It seems to conceal a very deep city and unknown calculations. Hu Hai reads books, not word by word like normal people, but skimming over them in leaps and bounds. Occasionally, he paused somewhere for a moment, a flash of realization in his eyes. Funny, so funny. He always had an impish smile at the corners of his mouth. It was as if everything in the world was within his grasp, just as Hu Hai was idly savoring the pastries on the case. Suddenly, an unusually salty pastry slid into his mouth. This sudden salty taste was like a handful of salt sprinkled on the otherwise calm lake of his heart. Instantly, his anger was aroused. Asshole! Hu Hai slammed the table and shouted angrily. His face instantly clouded over, as if it were the calm before a storm. It made for an inexplicably depressing experience. As Hu Hai's angry voice fell, the maids on the side fell to their knees and shivered. The maids of the house know that His Highness has an erratic temperament. At the moment, his anger was like a thunderstorm, and the slightest mistake would lead to killing. However, just as the maids were alarmed, Hu Hai's expression, however, once again regained its composure and gentleness. He smiled slightly, as if the anger he had just felt was just an illusion. He waved his hand gently, signaling the maids to rise. That's just it. Just get up. Hu Hai's tone was so soft that it was as if nothing had just happened. However, his next words caused the maids to once again feel a bone-chilling chill. Go, have the cook who made this pastry slaughtered, Hu Hai said gently, as if he was just ordering a trivial matter. When the maids heard this, their hearts trembled, but they didn't dare to be the slightest bit negligent. They bowed their heads and retreated in response, but in their hearts they felt a deep fear of His Highness's disposition. Hu Hai looked at the departing backs of the maids, and a hint of satisfaction flashed in his eyes. He picked up the Confucian texts again and continued to read them, and it was as if everything that had just happened was just a small interlude that didn't affect him in the slightest. At this time, Zhao Gao lightly stepped into the study and couldn't help but feel a little surprised when he saw Hu Hai working so hard. With his hands behind his back and a smile on his face, he asked softly, "How did your highness remember to read this Confucian thing?" Hu Hai raised his head, his narrow eyes slightly sunken, and looked at Zhao Gao. There was a warm, jade-like gleam in his eyes. He smiled slightly and replied, "Doesn't master think it's funny? Although Confucianism focuses on benevolence, righteousness and morality, but there is also a lot of wisdom in governing." Zhao Gao heard this, and his heart stirred, and he asked tentatively, "Is it because today, in the courtroom, your son is? It is only the remarks of the emperor's eldest son, Ying Ziye, that are so?" Hu Hai nodded, and a chill flashed through his eyes. Murmuring, "Elder brother is really deeper than I thought. His insights in the courtroom today were a bit shocking, but when you think about it, yet it is quite reasonable. It seems that the dude image he usually displays is nothing more than a cover." Zhao Gao looked at Hu Hai's eyes and, knowing that the young male had realized the potential threat, what the gentleman said is true. Although Ying Ziye is outwardly debauched and uninhibited, in reality, he has a deep heart. If your son wants to make a difference in the future court, he needs to be careful and watch out. When Hu Hai heard this, he looked deeply at Zhao Gao, and a hint of realization flashed in his eyes. In a deep voice, he said, "Don't worry, master, I have my own measure." In the residence of the elder duke, the courtyard is deep, quiet and secluded. Bai Xue stepped lightly into the study and saw that Ying Ziye was walking idly, seemingly pondering something. She had always known her own brother Ziyou's character, seemingly spontaneous and, the truth is that the heart is deep and unfathomable. Bai Xue slowly opened her mouth and covered her lips with a light laugh, her voice like a clear spring striking a stone. Clear and pleasant to the ear. What brother Ziyou said in the courtroom today, although it is the truth, but in full view of the public, it is a bit shocking. When Ying Ziye heard this, he turned around and looked at Bai Xue, the corners of his mouth hooked into a soothing smile. "What I said is the truth. Besides, father is so wise and powerful that he will be able to tell right from wrong." Today, Bai Xue heard about Ying Ziye's shocking words above the courtroom. The heart couldn't help but ripple. She gently shook her head, the worry in her eyes hard to hide. She knew that accompanying a king was like accompanying a tiger, and if brother Ziyou was so outspoken, in case he angered the dragon's face, the consequences are unimaginable. "Brother Ziyou, although what you say makes sense, you must know that the heart of a king is unfathomable." Bai Xue's tone contained a hint of reproach, but it was more of a concern and worry for Ying Ziye. How can brother be so rash? This chapter is not finished. Please click the next page to continue reading. Thinking of the serious consequences that could result, an inexplicable fear welled up in Bai Xue's heart. What if His Majesty blames you for this and breaks off our engagement? Bai Xue's tone revealed a hint of determination and firmness. She raised her head and stared into Ying Ziye's eyes. As if to find a hint of comfort and assurance in his eyes, If I am really to marry Fusu, then I would rather die. Wen Zai looked at Bai Xue's determined eyes and his heart couldn't help but tremble. He naturally knew that Bai Xue had deep feelings for him, but he didn't expect her to be so determined. He was silent for a few moments. His face was a little more grave, and he said slowly, "Don't worry about me." Self-explanatory. Bai Xue sniffed and a trace of helplessness flashed in her eyes. She knows that Brother Ziyou has always been true to his word, but she also knows that the winds and clouds above the court are unpredictable. No one can predict what the future holds. Thinking of this, Bai Xue couldn't help but sigh softly. At that exact moment, the sound of an announcement came from outside the gate of the mansion. The Inyang clan's moon immortal seeks an audience with the elder duke. Bai Xue sniffed and couldn't help but be surprised. Moon Immortal had a respected position above the court, as if he were a national teacher. She represents Tai Chi, who has never left Tianji Pavilion, and is its spokesperson, and she was second in power only to Tai Chi himself. Most of all, the Inyang family never had much contact with any of the princes or courtiers. What is the purpose of Moon Fairy's sudden visit today? With this in mind, Bai Xue's eyebrows knit tightly as she said, "Brother Ziyou, be careful of deception." On the contrary, it seemed that Wen Zai had already guessed the reason for this. With a slight smile, he said, "Since we're here, it's natural to meet." For about a moment or so, Yuxian entered the mansion and bowed to Ying Ziyou. The voice was gentle and clear. Tata de Master is in the Heavenly Chance Pavilion to comprehend the Heavenly Chance, and has no time to spare to come. The concubine was specially ordered to come and invite Elder Duke Chang to the Tianji Pavilion. End of this chapter. Chapter 18. The Inyang family is willing to help the prince sit in that position. Bai Xue heard it truly from the side and couldn't help but be suspicious in her heart. Though Tai Chi is honored by His Majesty, but it's not so big of a rack that the firstborn son of the emperor personally went to visit, is it? Her brows furrowed in anger, and she was about to speak out and refuse on behalf of Brother Ziyou. However, he heard that Wen Zai had already agreed. Good, I will go at once. Yuxian smiled faintly, as if she wasn't surprised by Ying Ziyou's decisiveness. She turned and walked outward while saying, "Concubine is outside the mansion, waiting for the Imperial eldest son." Bai Xue looked at Yuxian's departing back and felt more and more uneasy in her heart. She always found the Inyang family to be secretive and elusive. She looked worriedly at Wen Zai, but saw that he looked as normal as ever. Doesn't seem to be taking this to heart. Don't worry, Ying Ziyou softly comforted. I have my own measures. Although the Inyang clan is mysterious, they are not necessarily enemies. I am only going here to explore the reality. With that, he turned around and headed out of the mansion. Then, Brother Ziyou beware. Bai Xue looked at his determined back, and in her heart, although she was still worried, but one could only silently pray that he would be safe on this trip. Ying Ziyou stepped into the mysterious and unpredictable Tianji Pavilion as Moon Immortal led the way. The great hall within the pavilion was strewn with the light of the stars, as if it encompassed the entire universe. After completing her duty of leading, Yuxian quietly retreated, leaving behind the two of them, Tai Yi and Ying Ziye. Tai Yi was sitting under a star, as if a mysterious aura was shrouded around him. He spoke slowly, his voice low and penetrating, as if it could go straight to the heart. Elder Duke, have you ever wondered what kind of subtle power is contained between the stars? Tai Chi flicked his finger. A bit of starlight suddenly lit up, and then slowly extinguished. As if demonstrating some unfathomable power. This power, as deep as the sea and as vast as the sea, can both devour everything and nurture everything. Ying Ziyou's originally unimpressed demeanor gradually tightened as Tai Yi recounted the story. He gazed at the flickering starlight, a flicker of wonder and curiosity in his eyes. This power among the stars was both an unknown challenge and a potential temptation for him. Tai Chi continued, "This is the ultimate goal that the Inyang clan seeks, power that transcends the earth. Not only are they above all beings, but they can dominate life and death and control destiny." His words revealed a sense of majesty and dominance that, as if proclaiming some supreme power, this kind of power was undoubtedly of great appeal to Ying Ziyou. As the eldest son of the emperor, he naturally understood the importance of power, and the power that Tai Chi describes as transcending the earthly realm. Undoubtedly a higher and more mysterious power. It not only allows one to be king on earth, but also allows one to control life and death, and dominate destiny. However, Ying Ziyou also understood that this kind of power was not something that could be obtained easily. It comes at a great cost and requires numerous trials and tribulations, but that's what makes it all the more precious and alluring. Tai Yi nodded secretly in his heart as he watched Ying Ziyou's gradually becoming grave. He knew that the royal eldest son, who had been attracted by the words of his own, began to take a keen interest in the power that transcends the earth, and that is exactly what he expects, because only then would he be able to further guide Ying Ziyou towards the path he had set. Is this the purpose of your seeking my lord to come here? Ying Ziyou asked with a staring brow. Tai Yi gazed at Ying Ziye, his tone revealing an unquestionable majesty. Not bad. I can help you ascend to the throne. But, you also need to help me find this power. Ying Ziye smiled faintly, a hint of cunning flashing in her eyes. He shrugged, unimpressed. Deal. With that, he turned to leave, but then suddenly turned back and, in a deep voice, he said, "But, this mail has to remind you that I am not so good at controlling." Tai didn't care about Ying Ziye's provocation. He said lightly, "Your city is deeper than we thought, but you'll see. The only people who can help you the most are the Inyang family." Ying Ziye sniffed, but she only laughed softly and left the Tianji pavilion without looking back. His figure faded away under the light of the stars. Taichi didn't say a word. He understood that this deal had been struck, and that the next way to it was up to Ying Ziye to choose. At that moment, a shadowy figure then slowly stepped out of the darkness. It was as if the brightest shooting star in the night sky broke through the silence and descended into this heavenly hall. This is none other than the mighty protector of the Inyang family, the star god. He had a slender posture, and stars twinkled on his blue robe, as if he had draped the entire night sky over him. It was intertwined with the stars in the Tianji pavilion. His face was as white as jade, but it was so cold, and his eyes were as deep as cold pools, glowing with a cold and dangerous sheen. Each of his steps seemed to contain a certain rhythm, both light and. This chapter is not finished. Please click the next page to continue reading. Steady as if the whole world was gently trembling under his feet, the figure of the star god emerged, his black robe like ink, dotted with starlight, his face cold and his eyes deep. It was as if he was in control of the endless power of the stars. He walked slowly to Taichi, his voice cold as ice. "Your Excellency really thinks that will that Ying Ziye keep his word?" Between the words, there was an unquestionable majesty. Taichi sat motionless, his expression as calm as water. He opened his lips lightly and, the voice was low and powerful. "The depth of the Imperial eldest son city is far beyond my imagination. However, he will also realize that the power of the Yin and Yang family alone, only then can we help him ascend to that supreme position." After saying that, a deep light flashed in Tai's eyes, as if he was looking into everything in the world. The star god sniffed and let out a cold laugh, his black robes automatically moving without wind, revealing the cold arrogance and unruly nature of his heart. "Humph, if he dares to renege on his word, I wouldn't mind getting rid of him myself." The words were murderous and chilling. As the night grew thicker and the moon was like water, Ying Ziye returned to the mansion with heavy steps. The mansion was lit and silent, with only the sound of his footsteps echoing in the empty courtyard. He sat alone in his study, Taichi's words ringing in his ears. He was well aware of Taichi's plot, yet he also realized that he could take advantage of the situation. The current situation is complex. Hu Hai had the backing of the powerful minister Zhao Gao, who was in possession of the heavenly net and had enormous power. Fu Su, on the other hand, relied on Confucianism, which was backed up by Kong Shengshan, and its prestige in the imperial court could not be underestimated. Ying Ziye was sitting alone in his study. His mind was like the rising and falling of a tidal wave. It's all because of the ultimate power that Taichi set on the day. He knew that Taichi, as the leader of the Inyang clan, would never be aimless. The so-called ultimate power must be the result of years of secret research by the Inyang family. It is fundamental to its standing in the world. However, what kind of power is this? Can you help yourself in this game of power? Ying Ziye knew that Tai was not a generalized person, and that his words must have a meaning. End of this chapter. Chapter 19, Great Qin's fierce weapon, Black Ice Platform. What is ultimate? Or can it turn the tide, or upend the mountains? Thinking about this, Ying Ziye couldn't help but be moved to find out what was going on. He then ordered his attendants to fetch the secret books of the Inyang family and flipped through them one by one. But see between the lines, all the esoteric and difficult to understand the terminology, as if hiding in endless heaven. Ying Ziye sometimes gazed at his thoughts, sometimes closed his eyes and pondered, trying to catch a glimpse of what was going on. However, the art of the Inyang family is so vast and profound that it cannot be comprehended overnight. Ying Ziyou knew that it would not be easy to solve this mystery. However, the fire of curiosity in his heart was getting stronger and stronger. Vowing to unveil this layer of mystery, he decided to investigate secretly to solve the confusion in his mind. So he gently struck his palm 3 times, and suddenly a cold wind blew in through the window and bring on the slightest chill. Immediately after that, several black shadows appeared out of nowhere in the middle of the chamber. It was as if they had coalesced from the darkness of the night, soundless and silent, yet with an aura of solemnity. These black shadows were none other than the members of the Yellow Springs Assassins troop, all of them clad in black robes, their faces covered in cold iron. Only a pair of cold, ice-like eyes were revealed. Their aura was like the cold wind under the 9 sepulchres, cold and sharp. It was as if it could penetrate one's soul. "See you, Lord Underworld." The assassins knelt on one knee and whispered in unison. Their voices were not high, but they carried an air of unquestionable majesty and loyalty. Ying Ziye slightly raised her hand, signaling them to get up. His gaze was like a torch as he scanned the assassins. These assassins were not only highly skilled, but more importantly, they were loyal to their own. "Give everything for your great cause. Do you know what you have been summoned for this night?" Ying Ziye asked in a deep voice. "Please ask the Underworld Lord for clarification." The assassins responded in unison, their voices firm and resolute. "The reveals an undaunted courage." Ying Ziye nodded slightly and slowly said, "My lord wants to know the secrets of the Inyang clan, especially with the ultimate power they seek. This is a matter of great importance, and it is not beyond the capacity of your people. You need to secretly investigate. Be sure to act carefully, not to leak half the wind." The assassins sniffed and a glint flashed in their eyes. Investigating the Undertakers? They were well aware of the importance and danger of this mission, but they didn't have the slightest intention of retreating. "Please don't worry, Lord Underworld. We will do our best to fulfill our mission." The assassins swore in unison. Their voices were powerful, revealing a strong sense of conviction and determination. Ying Ziye nodded in satisfaction. He knew that these assassins were his own men of heart and soul. "Never let yourself down." With a wave of his hand, the aura of solemnity in the chamber dissipated with it. Just at this moment, suddenly the sky seemed to be torn apart by an invisible force. A deafening roar was like a giant thunder breaking through the sky, shaking the entire mansion. The crowd looked up in astonishment, only to see a reddish, blood-like fire streak across the sky from the night sky was instantly illuminated as if it were day. Ying Ziye's heart fluttered and his face was grave. This firelight, could it be a vision of heaven and earth, heralding some unknown change? However, the members of the Yellow Springs assassins were as motionless as a rock. There were no waves in their eyes, only absolute obedience and steadfast guardianship of Ying Ziye. Ying Ziye's gaze was like a torch as he gazed at the firelight outside the window, his mind racing with thoughts. He knew deep down that the firelight was by no means unusual. "Yellow Springs Assassin Corps at your service," Ying Ziye droned in a deep voice. The voice revealed an unquestionable majesty. "You and others will not leave this mansion day and night from this moment onwards, and you will be ordered at any time. Send someone to investigate the source of this heaven and earth anomaly. As for the matter of the Inyang family, be sure to intensify your investigation and report back as soon as you find anything. Do not act without authorization until you have received a clear order from my lord." Only, the assassins moved and disappeared into the chamber as a dark shadow. Calm was once again restored to the chamber. Yet there was still an air of sternness and coldness in the air. The aura is chilling, as if foreshadowing the thrilling contest that would follow. Inside the Zhongtai Palace, the lights were on. Zhang, dressed in a mysterious robe, with imperial authority, his brows refined and deep, sits on the dragon couch, was concentrating on reviewing the Sangha. Suddenly, there was a loud bang in the sky that shook the entire palace, and the candlelight wavered. With a slight frown on his face, Zhang put down the zhangben in his hands and raised his head to look out the window. At the same time, dozens of figures quickly emerged from the darkness. They were dressed in black, their faces covered with cold iron, and their actions were swift and silent, just like ghosts. These are none other than the members of the Black Ice Terrace. They're like sharp blades in the dark night, always ready to cloak the emperor. The Black Ice Platform is the secret weapon of the emperor's son, Zhang. This organization is deeply hidden outside the Imperial court and far away from the rivers and lakes. This chapter is not finished. Please click the next page to continue reading. It belongs to the emperor alone and is not bound by the 100 officials. Its duties are extraordinary. The first is to protect the emperor's safety, and the second is to explore the wind and clouds of the four seas. Search the world's secrets for holy judgment. The members of the Black Ice Platform are not generalized. They either come from a reckless background, or from a family, but without exception, all have been selected and trained to the hilt. These processes not only test the human martial arts intelligence, but also in sharpening the will of the heart. Therefore, the men of the Black Ice Terrace are all skillful. Their hearts are as hard as iron, and their means are as hot as iron. It's scandalous, but what is even more awe-inspiring is his loyalty to the emperor. The men of the Black Ice Tower pledge their loyalty to Zhang, no matter how far away they are, whether in life, death, honor or disgrace. This will remain, or in the Imperial court, or in the Jianghu, but heard the name of the Black Ice Platform, all will stand in awe, or bile chills for 3. This mysterious, condensed and murderous atmosphere is the unique style of the Black Ice Platform. Its members acted ably and decisively, leaving no trace. Its methods are strong and ruthless and should not be underestimated. Therefore, those who speak of the Black Ice Platform must be in awe before they dare to say one or two. At this moment, the members of the Black Ice Terrace quickly laid down a heavy line of defense around the Zhongtai Palace, ensuring Zhang's safety. Their eyes were cold and sharp, as if they could penetrate the darkness and see everything, and outside the Zhongtai Palace, a large number of soldiers had gathered. They were armed with spears and clad in armor, and they were as aggressive as the enemy. The commander Li Xian was even wearing heavy armor and holding a long sword. Standing at the front, he looked up into the sky, a flicker of doubt and worry in his eyes. Your Majesty, is it necessary to strengthen the guard? Li Xian bowed and inquired. As a commander, he naturally knew that heaven and earth visions often signaled the occurrence of unusual things. Ying Ziyou waved his hand, signaling that Li Xian did not need to be nervous. He stepped out of the chapter palace and looked up at the sky. The firelight had disappeared, but the stars in the night sky shone with an eerie glow. He knew that this heaven and earth vision was by no means unusual. Go check, Ying Ziyou ordered indifferently. Find out what has happened. Li Xian led the way, while the members of the Black Ice Terrace were like ghosts that silently disappeared into the darkness. End of this chapter. Chapter 20, The Imperial Power of the Son of Heaven. It's time. A Black Ice Terrace assassin appeared at Ying Ziyou's side like the wind in the shadow of a shadow, and with the lightness of his movements, it was as if a meteor had crossed the night sky without causing the slightest fluctuation. He presented with both hands a sealed brocade, on which, in fine writing in vermilion, revealing an air of mystery and solemnity, Ying Ziyou took the brocade and unfolded it. What was written on it was actually a secret report about Ying Ziye being invited to the Inyang clan's Tianji pavilion. His eyes were like torches as he scanned every word on the brocade and pondered in his mind. This Yin and Yang family, Tianji pavilion, is an extremely mysterious force in the Jianghu. This time, he even invited Ying Ziye to go. There must be something strange about it. He looked up in the direction where the firelight had disappeared, a glint in his eyes, vision of heaven and earth, invitation of the house of Yin and Yang, and winning the night of the sun. All of this seems to point to a great mystery. He had to find out the truth as soon as possible and take the initiative. Pass on my order. Ying Ziyou droned in a deep voice, revealing an unquestionable majesty in his voice. Declare eldest Prince Ying Ziyou to enter the palace. With Ying Ziyou's order, the whole Zhongtai Palace was once again thrown into a busy state. The courtiers moved quickly, while the members of the Black Ice Terrace crept into the shadows. Continue to guard Ying Ziyou's safety. In front of the palace of Zhongtai, the storm clouds are in the air. Ying Ziyou stood with his arms folded, like a dragon with its head held high, overlooking the 10,000 miles of rivers and mountains. The depth of his gaze was as if he could penetrate the layers of clouds and fog and look straight into the hearts of the world. Behind them, a gentle but firm step sounded. Ying Ziye walked in a slow pace, his clothes fluttering, quite like a dragon's stride. He looked at Ying Ziyou's back, arched his hand in a salute, and said respectfully, Father, my son, Ziyi, by order. Ying Ziyou slightly sidled his head, revealing a majestic yet gentle face. He whispered, Ziyou, you're here. The voice was not high-pitched, but it had the aura of a king in the world. Accompany Father Emperor to enjoy this magnificent view of Xianyang. Ying Ziyou said, his gaze once again casting into the distance. Ying Ziyou arrived at the sound of the voice and followed close to Ying Ziyou's side. When he looked up, he saw that the Zhongtai Palace towered over the clouds and was magnificent, and he couldn't help but sigh in his heart. And, is this the top of the world in Father's mind? Ying Ziyou seemed to have read Ying Ziyou's mind and slowly said, Ziyou, do you know why I love this Jiangdai palace alone? Ying Ziyou shook her head to indicate that she didn't know. A trace of reminiscence flashed in Ying Ziyou's eyes as he slowly said, since I succeeded the throne, every day, I stop here for a moment, for this is the supreme place of Great Qin, and where the widow overlooks the world. After a pause, he continued, even if today Great Qin has unified the 6 kingdoms, I am still on the alert. With the Rongdi in the north, and the remaining 6 kingdoms and the 100 schools of thought at home, I am still on the alert. Although the power of this world is in my hands, I can't slacken off in the slightest. Speaking of this, Ying Ziyou could not help but tighten his grip on the windless sword at his waist. An overpowering might emanated from his body, as if he wanted to press the world's heroes to lower their heads. Ying Ziyou couldn't help but feel a sense of awe in her heart when she felt this might. He understood more about his father's good intentions and the heavy responsibility on his shoulders. Ying Ziyou turned his words around and suddenly asked, Ziyou, do you know that people in this world? Why are you loyal to the widow? Ying Ziye replied archly after a little thought, because father is an emperor, holds the greatest power in the world. Not bad. Ying Ziyou nodded appreciatively. They want everything that. All of them need to be dependent on Great Qin, and the widow, as the king of the world, has naturally become the target of their pursuit. He looked up into the sky, his gaze becoming distant and deep. The wrath of the Son of Heaven ambushes 10 million corpses. This is the might of the Emperor. Even if I don't have any half cultivation, I am still the lord of the world, so why do I need to use the power to survive? I can look out of the corner of my eye. Ying Ziye's heart was enlightened at these words. It turns out that father summoned himself today to teach him the art of empire. He looked at Ying Zhang's majestic and determined face, and an indescribable feeling of grandeur welled up in his heart. Ying Zhang saw that Ying Ziye's eyes were gradually clearing up, and knew that he had realized his meaning. Couldn't help but look appreciatively. His words turned once again, referring to years gone by. Ziyou, do you remember the cranes that I raised back then? His gaze was deep, as if through the dust of time and space. Saw the flock of cranes that once soared over the palace garden. Ying Ziye's heart stirred, instantly understanding her father's intentions. He arched his hand and replied, my son has kept in mind that those cranes, signifying the 6 kingdoms, father with the art of harnessing birds, but in fact, the darkness of the way of harnessing the lower. My son is foolish. Today I realize. Upon hearing this, Ying Zhang's dragon face was greatly pleased, and he praised, not bad, Ziyou, you are really smart. Your performance in the courtroom today has shown the widow your potential imperial stature. The road to empire is by nature a path full of questions and challenges, but the widow believes that you will be able to come out in your own splendor. Ying Ziye felt his father's love, and his heart was agitated. Ancestor Dragon's words were full of praise for Ying. This chapter is not finished. Please click the next page to continue reading. The care and expectation of the sub-knight. He was well aware that this son had been much questioned in the court of but today's performance gave him hope. He believed that, given enough sharpening and instruction, Ying Ziyou will surely become a qualified emperor. A warm current surged in Ying Ziyou's heart as she felt her father's care and expectations. He is also aware of the great responsibility on his shoulders. Then, Ying Zhang asked about the Inyang clan's invitation. Ziyou, you're going to the Inyang clan's Tianji pavilion this time. What is the matter? Although its voice is light, it seems to have a deep insight into everything. Ying Ziyou was frank in her heart, so she told her the whole story without hiding anything. He knew that in front of his father, there was no need to be clever with his words, but only to be honest. Besides, since Ying Zhang knew that he was going to the Inyang clan, he must have guessed the reason. After hearing this, Ancestral Dragon's face did not change, as if he had already anticipated everything. When the first emperor heard this, no semblance of anger surfaced between his brows. Ziyou, if you have such a heart, I have also fought for it in the beginning. However, the way of the emperor is not only a struggle of force, but also lies in the art of power. With that said, he told Ying Ziyou in detail about the subtleties of the emperor's power tactics, and how to use wisdom to harness the ministers and control the world. As Ying Ziye listened, his heart became brighter and brighter, and his admiration for his father became deeper and deeper. After Ying Zhang finished his narration, his gaze once again fell on Ying Ziyou. The deep eyes revealed some appreciation. He slowly said, Ziyou, although you have deficiencies, you have potential to be tapped. The widow is very optimistic, and I hope that you do not bear high hopes. After saying that, he waved his hand, signaling that Ying Ziyou could step back. Ying Ziye's heart was agitated, and after bowing, he turned to leave. He knew that his father's words were not only an affirmation and expectation of himself. It's more about the expectations and the weight of your future. He was determined to live up to his father's expectations, and would definitely walk out an imperial path of his own. End of this chapter. Chapter 21, 800-Mile Expedition. The Black Dragon Scroll is present. The next day, at dawn, the sky first showed fish belly white. Everything is still immersed in a hazy sleep. Suddenly, a rush of thunderous hoofbeats approached from afar, cutting through the silence of the early morning. But see a knight, well attired and grave, carrying a black dragon flag on his back. The galloping horse came galloping in. The black dragon flag was extraordinary, with a basalt-colored background and a hideous black dragon embroidered on the flag. The dragon's scales glistened, and the dragon's eyes were like torches. The flag rolled with the wind, and the black dragon seemed to be flying in the clouds, wanting to break through the flag. The flagpole is as black as ink. I don't know what material it is, but it faintly reveals a gloomy and cold atmosphere. Behind the knight, the black dragon flag hunted, and the sound of the wind was like the roar of a dragon and a tiger, chilling one's heart. At this moment, the black dragon flag's majestic and mysterious aura reached its peak. It was as if it were not a simple flag, but represented some ineffable force that. It is a symbol of imperial power and a sign of heavenly destiny. Wherever it passed, the air seemed to freeze, and all living things held their breath. The people of Xianyang City were shocked by the sudden sound of horses' hooves and the black dragon flag. There was a lot of stopping and watching and talking. They knew that once this black dragon flag appeared, it would inevitably represent a major event. And at this moment, the knight bearing the black dragon banner was galloping up to undoubtedly adding a heavy dose of sternness to this early morning. This black dragon flag is not an ordinary thing. It is a symbol of the supremacy of the empire. Wherever the black dragon flag passes through, no matter how big or small the official position, how many or how few the people are, they all need to stand in awe. Retreat. The black dragon flag is a symbol of imperial power, representing the will of the Son of Heaven and the majesty of the nation. If anyone who doesn't know what's good for him dares to stop or offend the black dragon flag, he'll be committing a crime. High treason. The severity of his crime is enough to exterminate 9 clans and leave no one behind. Therefore, when the guards of the Inyang palace looked at the black dragon flag waving in the wind from afar, when he came speeding in with the momentum of a rainbow, even if he had a million doubts in his heart, he did not dare to stop him in the slightest. That's the black dragon flag. Quickly, open the city gates quickly. They knew the importance and special nature of the black dragon flag, and knew that they had to release it immediately at this moment. So the forbidden guards sprang into action, some running to the city gates, some informing the palace that open the city gates as fast as possible, so that the knights bearing the black dragon flag can enter the Xianyang palace without any problems. The knight was carrying the black dragon flag, and he sped all the way to the courthouse. At that time, the courtroom has long been a gathering of 100 officials, civil and military ministers and generals, or head-to-head, or whispered discussion. The atmosphere seemed a bit stark. Suddenly, a rush of hoofbeats came from far and near, as if it were a violent wind and rain. The ringing of that 800-mile rush, like thunder through the ears. To the consternation of the 100 officials above the courtroom, they stopped talking and their gazes were cast in unison to the outside of the hall, a nervous look on their faces. This is an 800-mile expedited? An aged civil minister asked with a trembling voice. His face was pale, obviously frightened by the sudden loud noise. Not bad. A military general next to him replied affirmatively, and firmness and boldness flashed in his gaze. It seems that there is an urgent military situation to be reported to His Majesty. Could it be that something has happened at the border again? Another civil minister speculated anxiously. He held a jade pendant tightly in his hand, as if seeking a hint of comfort from it. Hush, keep your voice down. Don't make wild guesses. An official hastened to stop there. His brow was furrowed, and he was obviously worried about the sudden military situation as well. Above the courtroom, the emotions of the 100 officials were instantly ignited. They were either terrified, anxious, or expectant. A complex mix of emotions that, an invisible pressure was created. At this critical juncture, the only thing they could do was to wait for the first emperor's verdict and guidance. Soon, but the knight was seen breaking into the courtroom. Dusty, but not half as slack. He knelt down on one knee, and with both hands he raised the black dragon scroll high above his head, the flag hunting above the courtroom. It was as if the black dragon was about to rise up into the sky, pushing into the clouds. The knight held his head high and reported loudly. A meteorite fell from the sky in East County. This is an extraordinary change in the heavens. Please decide, Your Majesty. When these words came out, the courtroom was silent. The 100 officials looked at each other, an inexplicable panic welling up in their hearts. They know that a meteorite falling from the sky is an extremely rare celestial aberration. Often, it foreshadows the rise and fall of nations. And at this moment, this vision even appeared in the land of East County. What exactly is the sign? And what to do about it? The knight knelt above the court and waited for the decision of that supreme being. He knows that he is shouldering a heavy responsibility and does not dare to slack off. And the 100 officials in the courtroom held their breath at this moment. Only the soldier's hands, like iron pincers, gripped the black dragon scroll and raised it high above his head. As if holding a heavy mountain. He looked grave. His gaze was like a torch, revealing a sense of determination and perseverance. Ying Ziyou was seated high above the dragon platform, his posture majestic and calm. His face was as calm as water, not seeing the slightest ripple, just like a deep pool of still water. It's hard to get a glimpse of what's going on inside. His eyes were like torches, and he gazed down the hall at the Dusty. This chapter is not finished. Please click the next page to continue reading. Knight with a black dragon banner on his back. He couldn't help but recall all the legends since ancient times. A meteorite falling from the sky is an extremely rare event, and is often regarded as a sign of heaven's will, a harbinger of great change in the country. Ying Ziyou's heart was restless. Could it be that the meteorite falling from the sky was a warning from the heavens? Or is there an unknown catastrophe coming that will jeopardize the Great Qin kingdom? That black dragon scroll, an extraordinary thing, was made by the hands of Lu Ban, the divine craftsman of old. It is a collection of his life's work and wisdom. This scroll has been regarded as a national treasure since the founding of the state of Qin. Successive Qin kings have treasured it in the deep palace and kept it secret. And the method of opening this scroll is even more mysterious. and has only been passed down by word of mouth from one generation of Qin kings to the next. Outsiders have no way of knowing. The appearance of the Black Dragon Scroll appears to be bland and uninteresting, but it actually contains a mysterious secret. And the material of the scroll is even more peculiar and incomparable. Cold to the touch and resounding when struck. It was as if it contained some kind of mysterious power. If someone dares to forcefully break open this Black Dragon Scroll, not only will it trigger its built-in mechanism, make inside the letter instantly turned into ashes, and break open the person will also suffer the power of the backlash. Light is seriously injured. Heavy is life. Therefore, the soldiers were careful when presenting the scrolls, fearing any slip-ups. Above the court hall, the 100 officials looked at the Black Dragon Scroll in the soldiers' hands, all of them showing shock. They were well aware of the importance and danger of the scroll and understood the meaning of its appearance. For a while, the courtroom was silent. Only the rough breathing of the soldiers and the nervous heartbeats of the 100 officials echoed in the air. Ying Ziye was in the middle of the court, his face as calm as water, just like a deep pool, clear and hard to see the bottom, not the slightest fluctuation of panic. His eyes were as sharp as a falcon's. His gaze was like a torch, and he looked straight ahead, showing the vigor and calmness of the eldest son of the emperor. When the Black Dragon flag and the Black Dragon Scroll came into view at the same time, Ying Ziye couldn't help but be shaken inwardly. These two things have been kept secret since ancient times, unless in times of earthquakes and national tragedies. It shall not be shown lightly. The fact that they both appeared at the same time today must be a sign that a major change is coming. Thinking about this, an unnameable worry surged in Ying Ziye's heart. However, his face did not show any emotion, and he still maintained that calmness and composure. The Black Dragon flag and the Black Dragon Scroll, since the beginning of Qin's founding, have been hidden in the Deep Palace. Few appearances. History only appeared twice, and once it appears, it will be the wind and clouds. The world shook. The first time was when it was first created, and the second time was when the allied forces of the Six Kingdoms approached the Hangdo Pass in a critical situation. Since then, the Black Dragon flag and the Black Dragon Scroll have been hidden in the Deep Palace once again. However, today in the courtroom, the two appeared again at the same time, causing the 100 officials to be shocked. Above the courtroom, the wind and clouds are changing colors, and the hearts of all the officials are full of doubts. It seems that last night's incident, non-trivial, the Black Dragon flag and the Black Dragon Scroll, two treasures coming out at the same time, is not unusual. Could it be that Qin will be in great trouble, or even subverted? End of this chapter. Chapter 22. The first emperor dies, and the world is divided. The death of Qin, who, for a while, above the courtroom, the 100 officials whispered more than a few words. What is this vision? The Black Dragon and the two treasures, which do not come out of the world unless the country is in great trouble, have appeared together today. There must be something fishy. After saying that, they all showed a look of panic, looking at each other, as if seeking a trace of solace. A courtier let out a long sigh and shook his head bitterly. Heaven's will is unpredictable, and I fear that this sign is not an auspicious omen. Since the founding of the Qin Empire, we have never seen such a phenomenon. Despite the storms, today's event is very important. Need to be careful to deal with it. However, Inyang was sitting on top of the dragon chair, his face as calm as water. He gazed at the Black Dragon Scroll in the soldier's hand and it was as if they were trying to see through the mysteries and mysteries within. He turned a deaf ear and said nothing to the agitation and murmurs of the 100 officials. Only the hands that were gripping the handrails of the dragon platform were slightly hard, showing his inner unrest. The atmosphere in the courtroom was solemn. The 100 officials stood at attention, exchanged pleasantries, and murmured. The focus was all on the Black Dragon Scroll that was about to be presented. Inyang was sitting on the dragon platform, His Majesty solemn and his gaze like a torch. He bellowed in a deep voice. Silence, although the voice is not high-pitched, but there is a majesty, so that the 100 officials were silenced. The chatter stopped abruptly. Immediately afterward, Inyang ordered, present the Black Dragon Scroll. A eunuch carefully held up the scroll, slowly stepped forward and respectfully presented it to Inyang. Inyang received the scroll and slowly unfolded it, while his face gradually became grave. A flicker of shock flashed in his eyes. The next second, this supreme being's face changed abruptly, as if he had been struck by lightning. Above the scroll, it is written, the first emperor died, and the world was divided. The one who killed Qin was who? These few words were like thunderbolts from a clear sky, shaking Inyang's heart. In a flash, the courtroom was silent. The gazes of all the 100 officials were locked onto the Black Dragon Scroll in that supreme being's hands. It was as if there was some shocking secret hidden in that scroll. They knew the origin and importance of this Black Dragon Scroll, and their hearts could not help but feel anxious. I only saw Inyang's eyes like a torch, landing on top of the scroll. A flash of anger suddenly swept across the majestic face, as if there was thunderous anger brewing. It was followed by a loud boom. The emperor's might exploded in the courtroom as if it were substance. Although the 100 officials were uncertain, they instinctively felt a strong sense of oppression. They fell to their knees and were silenced. Asshole. Ying Ziyou was furious and said sternly, "How can such absurdity be tolerated in the world? It must be someone's malicious rumor." His voice revealed an unquestionable majesty and dominance. The supreme being's anger seemed to envelop the entire courtroom in a haze. The 100 officials were silenced and dared not speak, and could only silently pray that this sudden storm would calm down as soon as possible. At this moment, Ying Ziyou's face is covered with frost, and his gaze is like a sword, piercing people's hearts. His voice was like thunder and fury, and his words followed the law. Flux guarded the place where the heart fell, and ordered Meng Tian to lead the army. Slaughter its 100 miles of living creatures. With these words, the courtroom instantly fell into a dead silence. Ying Ziyou's icy voice seemed to carry a piercing chill that penetrated right into the hearts of the 100 officials. The crowd only felt a chill rising from the soles of their feet, instantly spreading all over their bodies. It was like being in an ice cave. They were all horrified and looked at each other with panic and uneasiness in their eyes. Some of the officials, with trembling hands, clutched the chow while as if that would calm the fear inside a little. Some of them stared at the ancestral dragon with wide eyes in disbelief. Other officers closed their eyes tightly and take a deep breath, as if bracing themselves. "Your Majesty, this is a move against heaven." An old minister finally couldn't help but step forward, and there was a deep concern in his voice. "Although the flux guarding heart is a bad omen, but will slaughtering innocent people solve the problem? This move will only provoke civil unrest and plunge Great Qin into a place of no return." As soon as his words fell, another official stepped forward. "Your Majesty, please think twice. As imperial officials, we should be mindful of the heart of heaven above and sympathetic to the people below. How can we disregard the people because of our own anger? This is against heavenly harmony and will be punished by heaven." They all know Ying Ziyou's temperament, but at the moment it doesn't matter that much. They cannot stand by and watch innocent people being slaughtered and do nothing about it. Ying Ziyou's face grew colder and colder as he swept his eyes like a torch over the 100 officials in the courtroom. The atmosphere in the courtroom became more and more tense, and the hearts of all the people were in their throats. They knew that it was hard to change what His Majesty had decided once, but even so, they still want to do their part to stop this disaster. The fluorescent confusion guards the heart, the great evil of heaven, the blood and light, and the evil omen. Now the ancestral dragon has ordered that he should be made to perform a massacre to avoid the wrath of heaven. However, such behavior is really against the will of heaven, and will surely stir up the grievances of the people. In the courtroom, all the Confucians were horrified to hear Ying Ziyou's order. They've always. This chapter is not finished. Please click the next page to continue reading. Respecting the teachings of Confucius and Mencius, and taking benevolence, righteousness, courtesy, wisdom and faith as the rules of conduct. How can we sit back and watch innocent people being slaughtered? So, all the Confucians also stepped forward and echoed that old minister's admonition in unison. Your Majesty, Chen Yu, a great scholar with a choked voice, was the first to step forward. Fluorescence guards the heart of the, although it is a bad omen from heaven, but my emperor is a wise and holy lord. He will be able to turn the danger into a safe and sound situation. The slaughter of innocents, is it not what a saintly ruler would do? I ask your Majesty to withdraw your order to protect my Great Qin's foundation for 10,000 generations. He was so earnest in his words that he couldn't help but tear up when he got emotional. All the Confucians saw the situation. All empathize with the situation, have wiped their tears with their sleeves. In unison, he echoed, "Please withdraw your Majesty's order. In order to protect my Great Qin's foundation for 10,000 generations. They wailed and pleaded, and it's as if every word unites their deep sympathy for the innocent people. They know that, though they are lowly in rank, at this moment, but the burden of saving innocent lives is on his shoulders. Your Majesty." Another elderly Confucian scholar stepped forward and bitterly stated the benefits, the slaughter of the innocent people of. Instead of avoiding heaven's wrath, the people's grievances will boil over, and then the people will rise up, and the world will be in chaos. My Great Qin's kingdom is in danger. Please think twice, Your Majesty. His words were powerful, and each word seemed to weigh as much as 1,000 pounds, hitting the heart. Please think twice, Your Majesty. The Confucians also shouted in unison, and their voices echoed in the courtroom. It was full of sadness and determination. In the face of the pleading and sobbing of the Confucians, Ying Ziyou's face became colder and colder. However, just at this moment, the second son of the Emperor Fu Su is to step out of the court class, respectfully and admonished, "Father, the Emperor, although the Flux Guardian's heart is fierce, slaughtering innocents is against heaven's peace. Please, Father, take back your order and find another plan." All the Confucians also echoed the same voice, pleading their words, sobbing and admonishing. When Inyang saw this, he stared at the scene, his anger hidden, his imperial might swirling, his aura as strong as an abyss. One can't help but feel chilled. End of this chapter. Chapter 23. Father's decisions are all for the sake of the people of the world. In the middle of the court, Li Si and Ying Ziye looked at each other and saw the worry in each other's eyes. However, at this moment, when the ancestral dragon is in a state of rage, who dares to touch its scales? The two were only silent as they made eye contact with each other. I saw Inyang's eyes glaring at the ministers and said coldly, "My decision has been made, so I don't need to say anything more. Retreat." After saying that, Inyang whisked his sleeves up and walked towards the courtroom. His steps were firm and strong, as if no one could stand in his way. The 100 officials in the courtroom looked at each other with helplessness and fear in their hearts. They knew that Inyang's decision had been made and could not be changed. However, Fusu and the others were not deterred by Inyang's indifference. They have the whole world at heart. How can they sit back and watch the people suffer? So, they all stepped forward, disregarding the etiquette of the court, and raised their voices in unison. Father, Fusu was the first to speak, his voice filled with earnestness and anxiety. I know that you are worried about the world, but there are other ways to resolve the sign of the fluorescent perplexity guarding the heart, and slaughtering innocents is not what a wise ruler would do. Please think twice. Father, in order to protect the countryside of my Great Qin. His cries echoed through the courtroom. It was as if every word and every sentence condensed his great expectations for the ancestral dragon. The other ministers echoed the sentiment, and together they pleaded with Inyang to withdraw his order. Chun Yu was even in tears, painfully explaining the advantages and disadvantages. Your Majesty, the people are the foundation of the country. If we kill innocent people indiscriminately, it will shake the foundation of the country, and this is against the harmony of heaven, and will be punished by heaven. Please, Your Majesty, for the sake of all the people in the world, take back your order. The voices of the ministers were like sobs and sorrows. However, the ancestral dragon ignored them all and went off alone. In the midst of the courtroom class, Li Si has a meticulous mind and eyes like a torch. In this time of chaos in the courtroom, he noticed the eldest son of the emperor, Ying Ziye. At this moment, his face was calm, as if he was out of the picture. Li Si was curious, so he stepped forward and softly inquired, "Dare I ask you, Your Excellency, what do you think of this matter?" Ying Ziye sniffed and slowly raised his head, glancing at Li Si. His gaze was deep and resolute, as if he could see through the heart. It is natural that father has a deeper meaning in doing so, and the others do not understand father. But for his son, but you shouldn't not understand. The Prime Minister has always been wise, and can certainly understand father's intentions better than anyone else. His eyes burned and his voice was filled with admiration and pride. Father destroyed the 6 kingdoms and unified the world. The book is in the same language, the car is on the same track, and the feudalism is abolished. These great deeds cannot be done by a person who is not wise and courageous, and my father's decision, all for the sake of the people of the world, and for the sake of 1,000 generations of my Great Qin. The construction of the Great Wall, though laborious and costly, will be of great benefit to the people and the country and will be of great benefit to the people in the autumn and the winter. The Great Wall stands as the backbone of the Qin Empire, protecting the people on the border from foreign invaders. It is not for the ordinary? His words were powerful, as if every word was a defense of Zulan's decision. Every decision father makes is for the sake of the world, for the sake of the prosperity of my Great Qin, for the sake of the people. As the sons and daughters of our father, we should realize our father's suffering and assist him. Rule the world together. At these words, Li Si's eyes widened in disbelief as he looked at Ying Ziye. He never thought that. It is amazing that this young royal eldest son is able to understand His Majesty's heart so deeply. In his impression, Ying Ziye has always been a playboy who doesn't ask about politics and winds up in the snow. But at the moment he showed a different side. Li Si couldn't help but exclaim in his heart, "Truly a tiger's father has no son." He was impressed with Ying Ziye, and at the same time, he gained some new insight into Inyang's decision. He knows that His Majesty is an eloquent and majestic lord. Every decision he made was for the future of Great Qin. But Rees also understood that slaughtering innocents was not a wise move, and his mind was still filled with worry. At that exact moment, Zhao Gao came in hurriedly. He bowed and saluted. His Majesty has decreed that the Prime Minister and eldest prince are invited to the Zhongtai Palace. Upon hearing this, Li Si and Ying Ziye exchanged glances, both seeing worry and determination in each other's eyes. They knew that Inyang must have something important to discuss with them. At that moment, he did not dare to delay and immediately followed Zhao Gao to Zhongtai Palace. On the palace of Zhongtai, the storm clouds are in the air. Inyang was dressed like ink and stood alone on a high platform. The wind blew his robes, as if he were a heavenly bird of paradise, soaring above the 9 heavens. However, underneath the 9 beads of the tassel, it is hard to hide the deep helplessness of that 1,000-year-old emperor. The world was divided at the death of Shi Huangdi, and the one who killed Qin was who? The celestial sign showed that the flux guarded the heart and seemed to foretell the future fate of the Great Qin Empire. Ying Ziyou's anger and resentment are intertwined in his heart, and he is angry that it is difficult to disobey heaven's order. The complaint is that the empire he has worked so hard to build may be in ruins. At this moment, a palace servant reported, "Your Majesty, the eldest son, Ying Ziye, and the Prime Minister, Li Si, are seeking an audience." Ying Ziyou collected his emotions and said majestically, "Declare." Soon after, Ying Ziyou and Li Si arrived jointly. Ying Ziye saluted like a ritual. "My son pays his respects to my father." "Ziyou, do you also want to be with your brother?" This chapter is not finished. Please click the next page to continue reading. Brother Fusu in general, to advise me? Ying Zhang's voice was majestic and deep, as if echoing from the abyss. It makes it impossible to peer into their inner mood swings. With a calm expression on his face, Ying Ziye stepped forward and bowed his hand. "Father, be clear. My son is not here for advice. As the son of my father, I should share my father's worries." When Ying Zhang heard this, his gaze flickered slightly and he gave Ying Ziyou a deep look. He sighed, seeming a bit tired. "Also, Yuan, take a look at this." With that, he took out the black dragon scroll from his wide-sleeve robe and handed it to Ying Ziye. Ying Ziyou took the scroll and slowly unfolded it. On the side, Riz also came up curiously, and yet, at a mere glance, he was struck by lightning, and his whole body froze on the spot. On top of the scroll, 2 lines of scarlet handwriting were like congealed blood, shocking to the eyes. Waves of shock rippled through Reese's mind. He couldn't imagine that once news like this got out, what kind of disaster will be brought to the Qin Empire? He looked up at Ying Zhang in shock, but saw that the Supreme Emperor's face was as calm as water. It was as if he had anticipated his reaction. Li Si's heart can't help but sigh. His Majesty's state of mind is really beyond my reach. Ying Zhang looked at the shocked expressions of Ying Ziyou and Li Si and said indifferently, "Now, have you ever understood my pain?" There was a hint of helplessness and desolation in his voice. Ying Ziyou was silent for a moment, then slowly raised her head and he looked at Emperor Shi Huangdi with a firm gaze. "Father, I am willing to share my father's worries. Although this heavenly phenomenon is fierce, man will prevail over heaven. Will my great Qin Empire shake its foundation because of this?" When Ying Zhang heard this, a trace of appreciation flashed in his eyes. He gave Ying Ziyou a deep look, then turned to look into the distance, as if pondering something. On one side, Liz was reticent. Seeing this, Ying Ziye stepped forward with resounding words. "Father, my son will never submit to the will of heaven. If heaven loses its way, I will act against it. The founding of our nation is not subject to the will of heaven. As the Supreme Emperor of Great Qin, I am blessed by the mandate of heaven. So why should I be afraid of this small celestial phenomenon?" When Ying Zhang heard this, his eyes shone brightly and his laughter shook like thunder. "Good. This is very much to the mind of the widow. Going against the grain, going against the grain. Ziyou, you are truly my pride and joy. You have not failed me." Seeing this, Ying Ziye said, "Father, this is a very important matter and should not be publicized. The meteorite from the sky is an ominous sign, and it is appropriate to keep it secret to prevent traitors from spying on it. And as for the slaughter of the people, I am afraid that it will hurt the foundation of the country. It provokes the people's discontent." Ying Zhang was not aware of this, and after a moment's meditation, he ordered with dignity, "Pass on my decree. Tell Meng Tian to lead the troops and secretly escort the foreign stones back. Be sure to block the news. If anyone leaks out, he will be executed without mercy." "My son, Minister, obeys the order." Ying Ziye and Li Si responded in the same voice, solemnly accepting the order. When Ying Ziye retired, Ying Zhang watched his back disappear, a satisfied smile appearing at the corner of his mouth. He turned back to Li Si and said, "Ziyou is truly a pillar of talent, and when he inherits the throne in the future, it will be able to continue my ambition." Li Si made a deep bow and said respectfully, "Your Majesty's discerning eye recognizes pearls, and Duke Chang is truly the best among men." Despite his words, he secretly admired Ying Ziye's courage and wisdom. With this in mind, Li Si walked forward to Ying Zhang. Respectfully, he repeated the remarks made by Ying Ziye after she retired from the court. "Oh," when Ying Zhang heard this, he raised his eyebrows lightly and looked surprised. "Ziyou really said that?" Li Si hung his head and said, "What I have said is true in every word, and I dare not deceive your Majesty in any way." Ying Zhang's gaze is far-reaching, as if he is recalling the words relayed by Li Si. A moment later, on his face, a satisfied smile appeared. "This son is truly extraordinary. Of the many heirs, only Ziyou is most in my heart and understands me best." There is a lot of promise in these words. Inside the central vehicle mansion, the night was as dark as ink. Zhao Gao sat alone under the secluded bamboo, his eyebrows locked. He speculated in his heart. What is so important that His Majesty has excluded him? Thinking about Wen Zai, that unspeakable feeling of threat once again surged to his heart. Suddenly, 6 figures noiselessly appeared in front of Zhao Gao. It was as if they were already part of the place and had never left. These 6 people were none other than the mysterious powerhouses under the Zhao Masters, the 6 swords. They were dressed in black tights and their faces were veiled, revealing only a pair of cold, ice-like eyes. They held long swords, their swords flashing with a cold light, as if they could pierce through all obstacles. Their breaths were all one and separate, as if they were a contradictory collection of both righteous and wicked, cold and hot. Zhao Gao asked in a deep voice, "Where is Xian Yu?" At this time, the head of the 6 swords came out. His figure was stout, his face was firm, his sword eyebrows and starry eyes. The momentum is like a rainbow. The sword he holds is called Big Dipper, with a wide and straight blade. The whole body exuded a stern sword aura. The tip of the sword flashed with cold light, as if it could pierce the sky, and the sword's energy was strong enough to shock the. This chapter is not finished. Please click the next page to continue reading. Deterrence in all directions. The sword leader bowed and replied, "Your Honor, Xian Yu has been recovered, but he is seriously injured. Dying." Zhao Gao's pupils shrank and he said in a cold voice, "Bring him to me quickly." In a matter of moments, Xian Yu was brought into Zhao Gao's mansion. But see his person, heavily injured. His tall figure, at the moment as if by the frost erosion, getting skinny. The former deep face is now pale and colorless. The sword brows are locked. The starry eyes are lost. The pain was overwhelming. The 2 swords in his hands have also been mottled and tattered, as if they have witnessed the fierce battles that the owner has experienced. On top of the black sword, blood stains were streaked, like the remnant stars in the night sky, revealing an endless bleakness. The white sword has lost all its luster, just like a withered leaf. No longer has the elegance of the past. End of this chapter.